My husband and I first met when we were both 22 years old at his best friend's wedding. I instantly fell in love with him, and it seemed like he had some interest in me as well. The day after the wedding, we had our first date in the park, and our relationship quickly became intense. Felix was everything I ever wanted in a partner. Smart, kind, good-looking, caring, strong, and fair. He was always there for me when I needed support, comforted me during tough times, and helped with my problems. He wasn't just my rock, he was my ideal man, and I loved him completely. After a year, we decided to move in together, and a year later, we got married. However, our marriage had its share of challenges. My husband was hardworking and shared household chores with me, but financial issues began to strain our young family, leading to occasional conflicts. During one of our fights, I left home for 2 weeks. Felix, who usually avoided confrontation, was slow to make amends, and my pride stopped me from reaching out first. I waited for him to make the first move. During that time, Felix's best friend Daima, who was also my friend, offered support when he saw how troubled I was. Our conversations turned passionate, leading to a night we spent together. I saw it as payback for Felix's indifference. But just 3 days later, Felix came to me with roses, apologized, and begged for my return. I realized my mistake, but it was too late. We reconciled, and things got better. Then, I discovered I was pregnant, and to my shock, the child was not Felix's, but Daima's. I struggled with this revelation, but it was too late. So, the choice of whether to have the child or not was out of my hands. I gave birth to my son 6 months later, and I cried every night, regretting my foolishness and losing the love of my life. I knew I had to confess, but I couldn't bear to break Felix's heart. Throughout my pregnancy, he was overjoyed, proudly telling everyone about his beloved wife giving him a son. His emotional moment at the maternity hospital, holding our child and calling him my son, my joy, my daddy's pride, is etched in my memory. I had planned to tell him the truth when our son was older, but that moment never came, and I continued to lie. 14 years passed, and our family seemed harmonious. I buried my deceit because being a father means more than just biological ties. But, as they say, secrets have a way of coming to light. One day, Felix found the unsent letters I had written to Daima. When I came home, he was standing in the dark, holding those letters. It shattered my soul. He said nothing, and his eyes held no emotion. I cried, begged for forgiveness, and tried to explain, but he remained silent. In that silence, I realized the depth of my wrongdoing and was ready to face any consequences. Felix just moved away from the window, sat on the couch, and cried. Seeing this, I lost control and became hysterical, sobbing uncontrollably. He left without a word, and I kept crying, realizing I had destroyed his life. My husband and I are both 38 years old, and our son Tom was at the center of our world. We had hoped for another child, but my health issues prevented it. Felix had dedicated his life to raising his best friend's child, his pride, and now he knows it's all a lie. That night, all I could think of was my terrible mistake. I wanted to die, but my love for our son stopped me. The next morning, Felix packed his things and left, ignoring my pleas to stay. It's been 2 months, and I'm still searching for a chance to beg for his forgiveness. I may be a fool, but I believe I have a chance because Felix hasn't filed for divorce and still communicates with our son. Daima only found out he was the father a year after the birth. I thought it wouldn't affect him, but to my surprise, he developed paternal feelings. He offered to raise our child because he and his wife had none, but I refused, as I loved only Felix. Tom felt only friendly sympathy for his biological father, and I didn't want to disrupt his family. I begged Daima not to interfere, emphasizing my love for my husband, our son, and our family. Daima sent money as unofficial child support, but I refused. Eventually, he walked out of our lives, though he and Felix remained friends until the truth came out. As for the letters, I kept them out of sentimentality, but it ultimately cost me my family. My husband has always been a great man. After our first big fight, I made a foolish decision to stay with my brother for 2 weeks. We had a good, friendly relationship. After the argument with Felix, we often talked on the phone. He tried to calm me down and convince me to return to my husband. But I was waiting for Felix to reach out, not his friend. and he stayed silent. One evening, when my brother was out, Daima called and offered to come over, saying that these things happen in many families at first, and I needed a distraction. I agreed, and without much thought, he came over. And then today, my son came home after spending the weekend with his father and mentioned they discussed the future of our family. I've been anxious all day, wondering what Felix told his son. If he's willing to come back, he wouldn't lie to our child. Except for that one time, I haven't cheated on my husband in our 16 years together. It was my only mistake. My son doesn't know who his real father is, and hopefully he never will. He deeply loves Felix, trusts him, and is proud to have him as a father. Their bond is even stronger than the one he shares with me. If he found out the truth now, it would break his heart. In any case, a lot has changed this week. Last weekend, my son talked to Felix about the future of our family. Felix didn't give a definite answer, but didn't rule out the possibility of us reuniting. On Tuesday, I asked my husband out for a date at a restaurant, and to my surprise, Felix agreed, boosting my confidence for a positive outcome. We didn't stay at the restaurant for long, choosing a long 4-hour walk in the park. During our time together, we reminisced about our past and our love, smoothly transitioning to discussing our future. I pleaded with my husband to return to the family, and though he didn't say it outright, it was clear he wanted the same. That night, I purposely sent my son to spend the night at a friend's house, freeing the apartment for my beloved to join me. We spent the night together, just like in the old days. The next morning, our conversation was brief as we rushed to work. In the evening, as my son and I were having dinner, Felix unexpectedly arrived with his belongings. Words can't express the joy in that moment, and my son was thrilled to see his father. I wonder if Felix has truly forgiven me. My biggest fear is that after living with me for a while, he might decide he no longer wants this family. But I love him deeply, and I know I betrayed him. I'm willing to do anything to make amends. Since his return, my husband hasn't brought up the issue of paternity, and though he acknowledges what happened, he doesn't show anger or negativity toward me. Crucially, his relationship with Tom remains unaffected, which was a major concern for me. Last night, we talked about our son's future, and we both agreed that he would likely move out in a few years. Felix expressed his joy at being a father, and it got us thinking about having another child. I plan to see a doctor soon, and my husband was genuinely excited about the idea. It's been over a month since my last message. I've started treatment, and my beloved has been supportive throughout, not dwelling on the past. According to the doctors, I have a good chance of conceiving and having a child after the treatment. The process is expensive and time-consuming, but my husband and I are ready to face any challenges for our happiness. In retrospect, I recognize the enormity of my mistake, but time cannot be rewound. I must take responsibility and live with the consequences of my actions. Things have taken a different turn in the family of my child's biological father. Felix and Daima haven't communicated for months, and I thought it was the end of their story. However, I was wrong. Daima's wife found out that he had a child with me, and her pain and frustration are indescribable. She feels the same betrayal my husband experienced a few months ago, betrayed by her beloved husband and her best friend. We had one conversation, if you can call it that, with her yelling, crying, and even slapping me a few times. Since then, we haven't spoken, and I haven't attempted to contact her. I understand that she will never forgive me. I had hoped she would come to her senses and give her husband another chance. However, last week, she filed for divorce and kicked Daima out of the house. What pains me the most in this story are their 2 young daughters, aged 12 and 5, and now their family is shattered because of my fault, my mistakes. 6 people have suffered because of me. My beloved husband, who dedicated his whole life to his family. My son, who will never know that his beloved father, whom he idolizes, is not his biological father. My best friend, who lost her marriage because of me and is now left alone with 2 children. Her 2 little daughters, who lost their favorite daddy, and Dima himself. He lost the most in this story, a friend with whom they had been inseparable for more than 15 years. His wife, who now doesn't want to see him. His daughters, whom Nasty doesn't even allow to talk to their father, and convinces them that he is a traitor, his apartment, which he worked hard for, and which will now be taken by his ex-wife. All this suffering, all this pain, it's all my fault. I don't know if I have the right to have children at all. Why did my lover forgive me? Why? If I were in his shoes, I wouldn't even look at me. I started therapy so we could have a child of our own, but it didn't work out. In the end, we decided it's not worth it. These treatments are costly and unlikely to succeed. My husband initially reacted normally, or so it seemed, but later I realized how much pain he was in. The worst thing happened at the end of the summer. It was exactly what I had feared. Our son discovered the truth, a day I'll never forget. I wish I could forget, but I can't. I genuinely believed I could shield my child from the consequences of my wrongdoing. I hoped and prayed, but it was all in vain. When Tom learned the truth, something within him broke. He transformed from a sweet, kind boy, dearly loved and caring towards his family, into a different person within days. For nearly 4 months now, we've been living through a nightmare. My son has started drinking, smoking, staying out late at night, and we have no idea where he goes the rest of the time. He's made some unsettling friends, and just the sight of them gives me the creeps. Rough-looking kids with a bad reputation throughout the neighborhood. The police know me well, but they've done nothing. It's a family issue. Deal with it. We've got more important matters to attend to. That's all we hear. My son also hates Felix now, even though they were close before. What did he say to his father? I understand that he's just a child suffering due to my mistakes, but my husband didn't deserve this. He endured so much when the truth about Tom came out, and then we had to give up having a child of our own. And now, this living hell. A month ago, Felix started experiencing heart problems. He was hospitalized with symptoms resembling a heart attack. Thankfully, it wasn't a heart attack, but he's on medication and might need surgery down the road. The doctors have warned him to avoid stress, but my son seizes every opportunity to provoke him. I try to intervene, but my husband sees me as being helpless. I witness his pain and resentment daily. He spends days in bed in silence. I've told him that depression could break his heart, but he doesn't listen. We're only 39 years old, yet in this time, he's aged visibly, looking 50 and constantly appearing sad. I have developed wrinkles and deep bags under my eyes. I'm living in a hell of my own making. Every day, I berate myself for my mistake, my betrayal, and pray for peace and harmony in our family. But I no longer believe in that, not in God, not in a happy ending for us. Now I realize how foolish I was to think I could escape the consequences of my actions. I carry the weight of ruining the lives of 6 people, and it's a heavy burden on my conscience. Daima, on the other hand, has it even worse. Nasty divorced him and took him to court over their property, leaving him homeless. She's spiraled into a life of partying, drinking, and changing partners weekly, unable to recover from the betrayal of her husband and me, her best friend, almost like a sister. I've tried to talk to her several times, but she becomes hysterical upon seeing me, leading to heated arguments. She's always been morally weak, and I shattered her. Their daughters now live with Nasty in a 1-room apartment to avoid her different partners. I haven't heard from Dima for 6 months since their divorce. Total silence. December 31st should be a time of happiness, joy, and celebration, but not for me. My husband went to visit his parents in another city, and as for Tom, I have no idea where he is. He doesn't answer his phone. I've lost all my friends. Our family has been shunned since everything came to light, and it feels as if we're treated like outcasts. I sit at the table with a bottle, crying, not out of joy, but out of loneliness. This story took place last year when my husband and I were on vacation in Croatia. On the first day at lunch, we met a married couple, but their origin isn't that important. They had been there for 2 days already, making them experienced compared to us. Ron and Molly were passionate about scuba diving, just like my husband, Stephen. We spent most of our time together, sharing meals, diving, shopping, and attending various evening events. The only time we didn't meet was at breakfast because Molly was a late riser, and I didn't mind spending the morning on my own. But as I tend to get bored quickly, I'd head to the beach in the morning or later in the evening when it was cooler. During breakfast, we sat with different neighbors, usually 2 younger guys. Although I hadn't paid much attention to them, one spoke English well with a slight accent, while the other remained quiet and smiled. I pondered for a while about their origin, considering various possibilities, but eventually settling on them being Swedes or Germans. I was curious to see if I was right, but it felt somewhat awkward to ask. Our interactions were limited to exchanging greetings and wishing each other a good meal. We followed a routine during our vacation, one that we hardly deviated from. In the mornings, Molly and Ron would head to the beach. Later, when it got hot, we'd either return to our rooms or explore the city once the weather cooled down. Diving was part of the plan, then back to the beach until almost sunset, and finally, visiting a bar or cafe for some dancing in the evenings. In contrast to them, I didn't take up scuba diving, despite my husband's attempts to get me interested. I had a fear of diving to significant depths, where panic would set in, and I worried about running out of air. I couldn't conquer this fear, and my husband eventually went diving without me. Instead, I'd stay on the boat, swim around it, or sunbathe on the deck. After a few days of this, I got tired and began spending time at the hotel pool, swimming or relaxing by the poolside with magazines as my companions. One day, I was at the pool, either refreshing myself or reading a magazine when, suddenly, right by my ear, a voice greeted me with, "Good afternoon." Even though it wasn't spoken loudly, I was startled, and the magazine slipped from my hands. I instantly recognized the voice with its distinctive accent, hard to forget. Turning towards the voice, I saw my breakfast neighbor, standing there with a smile. However, my disapproving expression wiped the smile from his face, and he began apologizing, explaining that he didn't mean to startle me and asking for forgiveness. I remained silent and resumed reading my magazine, though my heart was still racing from the scare. He apologized once more and walked away. After a few minutes, I managed to calm down. Unexpectedly, he returned, offering another apology and explaining that he didn't intend to frighten me. He asked if he could buy me a drink, and despite my initial hesitation, I accepted the glass of wine he offered. It was cool and tasted good. He continued apologizing and then started a conversation. I learned more about him. His name was Troy. He was German, and he and his parents had lived on the island in the past before relocating to Germany in the 90s. He was on vacation with his friend Kurt, who understood a little English but didn't speak it. Our conversation flowed naturally, and I began to feel sorry for him. The following day, he returned, and by the third day, I found myself eagerly looking forward to his presence. He became a regular visitor, and we developed a strong connection. Our conversations spanned various topics, with no topics off-limits. We simply enjoyed our relaxed and pleasant discussions. Our stay at the resort continued, and we grew accustomed to each other's company. I valued our interactions, and he left a positive impression on me, and over time, I even started to like him. Our discussions covered a wide range of subjects, and there seemed to be no subjects we couldn't explore. It felt effortless and enjoyable. As our vacation progressed, we crossed the equator, and it was on Molly's birthday that our vacation routine shifted. On that day, Stephen and I, along with Ron and Molly, spent half the day searching for a birthday gift. In the evening, they invited us to a cafe for a light dinner and dancing. The husbands enjoyed whiskey, while Molly and I indulged in the local red wine, which was light and delightful to the taste, and surprisingly easy to drink. The wine had little to no taste, and we both had a fair amount. My head felt light, and I didn't even notice the intoxication. Molly and I had a wonderful time on the dance floor, while Stephen and Ron took a break and sat at a table, engrossed in their conversation. Molly and I would occasionally return to the table to catch our breath and quench our thirst. The atmosphere was delightful. The drink I had consumed was starting to take its effect. While we were at the table, I spotted Troy near the bar. He noticed me and waved. I mechanically waved back, and to my surprise, he made his way towards us. Troy asked my husband, "May I invite your wife to dance?" Stephen momentarily turned his attention away from his conversation with Ron and nodded in agreement. We started with a couple of quick dances, followed by a slow one. Troy put his arm around my waist, and I wrapped my arms around his shoulders, swaying together to the music. He whispered in my ear, and I let out a chuckle. When the music ended, we returned to our table. Surprisingly, Molly also seemed tired of the men's conversation, so she invited Troy to join us. To my amazement, he accepted the invitation. Upon discovering that it was Troy's birthday, he raised a toast to the birthday girl. After a while, the three of us, Molly, Troy, and I, headed back to the dance floor. When the music slowed down, Troy asked me to dance once more. After the dance, we returned to our table, had more drinks, took a short break, and I suggested that we all go dancing. Both Stephen and Ron declined, and so did Molly. Troy and I returned to the dance floor, and when it was a slow dance, his hand glided gently on my hips as we swayed. "Troy," I said. "What?" He pretended not to understand. "Your hand," I replied. "Sorry," he excused himself. "It's kind of automatic." After a while it happened again, and though he once more naively excused himself, it somehow continued to happen. He did it on purpose. Then his hand went down again and again. I stopped telling him, and even though his touch was pleasing to me, I just began to return his hand to my waist myself. At the next slow dance, it was all over again, and at some point, I got tired of taking his hand away. I just stopped paying attention. It was dimly lit on the dance floor, and no one was paying attention to us, and it was a long way to our table, with other dancers blocking the view. He began lightly caressing me. His touch felt nice, but there was still a limit. "Troy, come on, are you uncomfortable?" His question just stunned me. I thought he was going to make excuses, and I couldn't even find a way to answer him. He pulled me closer and began whispering in my ear, "You're so beautiful. I like you so much. When I saw you, the compliments just kept coming." His words were incoherent but exciting. My mind was a whirlwind, a mix of his words, the drinks, and the haze in my head. "Stop it, please." The compliments kept flowing. Suddenly, he stopped talking and started kissing me. My ear, my hair, my neck. A pleasant shiver ran through my body. And then I felt his actions become more active. God, what is he doing? Has he gone crazy? Stop it! I wasn't asking him. I was begging him. Don't! I was trembling with desire or fear or both. He took my arm and pulled me with him. I followed him as if I were in a trance, like I was in a fog. He was practically dragging me somewhere. Finally, we stopped, my back pressed against something, and he started kissing me again. I couldn't comprehend where I was or who I was with. The kisses covered my face, my hair, my neck. I was shivering all over. He found my lips and kissed them deeply. My skin was covered in goosebumps, and my desire grew. Troy's kiss stopped, and I could feel the warmth of his face and the unevenness of his breaths. Shivers ran through me, and the surroundings seemed hazy as I drifted into a mental fog. We navigated through some bushes and entered an alley. The cafe was just a few steps away, and my anticipation was building. Everything had unfolded beyond the cafe's walls, and we could have been seen. This thought sent a thrill through me, alternating between warmth and a shiver down my spine. Within minutes, we reached the entrance to the dance floor of the cafe. Leaning in, Troy whispered, "You're amazing. When my husband falls asleep, come over," and handed me his number. Still in a daze, I made my way to the bathroom. I splashed water on my face, trying to regain my composure. The cool water brought me back to reality. I realized that I was a married woman who had just betrayed her husband with a complete stranger. Returning to my husband and friends, a creeping fear intensified with every step. I felt a chill inside, my cheeks flushed, and it seemed as if I no longer had control over myself. Surprisingly, no one questioned my absence. I slumped into my chair and poured a full glass of wine. I sipped it slowly, attempting to hide any signs of what had occurred. Despite my efforts, Stephen noticed my detachment and asked, "Katie, are you okay?" I nodded silently. "Should we go home?" I nodded again. I was in a strange state of turmoil. On one hand, everything that had transpired thrilled me, but at the same time, I couldn't relax, fearing that we might be discovered. Stephen was unsteady on his feet, having had his share of drinks during the evening. That didn't concern me at all. I was looking forward to the night ahead, hoping I wouldn't have to go through such encounters with strangers in my life again.
I often wonder when I'll get over this. My fiancée and I were together for 6 years. I proposed to her during COVID, not knowing that she was already having an affair when she accepted my proposal. It's baffling, right? How can someone say yes to a marriage proposal while involved with someone else? Anyway, it's a long tale. I've been writing it out for weeks. It's like therapy for me, not really seeking advice, just trying to share my story. I'm not the most socially adept guy, especially with the ladies. But when I met my fiancée, let's call her Bess, I fell head over heels in love, in an instant. I'd never experienced love before, but I knew she was the one I wanted to spend my life with as soon as we met. Strangely, she seemed to feel the same way about me, and we were discussing kids and moving in together by the end of the week. Everything was wonderful until Discovery Day, at least from my perspective, although it clearly wasn't the same for Bess. One day, I caught a glimpse of a suspicious message on her phone, which made me pause. I couldn't sleep that night and ended up checking her phone while she was asleep. I'm quite tech-savvy, as I make a living from some mobile apps I developed. I'm not super wealthy, but I can comfortably take a year off without financial hardship. Anyway, I didn't find concrete evidence, but I did uncover a lot of suspicious activity like deleted messages. There was also a Snapchat contact with a lot of interactions and pictures of a guy I didn't recognize. So I installed spyware to monitor her phone, opting for the most expensive service I could find, which even allowed me to remotely access the camera and microphone. The following day, Bess was scheduled to go on a 5-day business trip, which wasn't unusual given her sales job. As soon as she left, the messages started pouring in, and I was devastated, even vomiting several times. I couldn't believe what I was reading. For a while, I refused to accept the truth and became obsessed, digging into everything I could access. I discovered that their affair had started over 2 months before I proposed. Her affair partner was a colleague, a married man 10 years her senior, with 3 children and a pregnant wife. The ultimate blow was hearing them together in a hotel room, proclaiming their love for each other, and discussing running away to start a new family. I was completely shattered and didn't know how to handle it. I couldn't muster the courage to confront her directly. Ultimately, I confided in my childhood best friend. Let's call him Kay. Kay grew up in a Brazilian household, and when he and his mother moved in next door when I was 12, this was in the UK, we became close friends despite not speaking the same language initially. I guess we bonded over shared experiences. Kay and I have been inseparable since, even though I'm a shy, nerdy type, and he's outgoing and fearless. I poured my heart out to Kay and showed him the messages and emails I had uncovered. He remained silent for a while, then told me he couldn't provide specific advice. This was something I had to deal with in my own way. He shared his own story of being cheated on and how he exposed his cheating partner to family and friends, and then went no contact. I was lost for the next few days. We packed up Bess's belongings and took them to a storage unit. We changed the locks on my apartment and prepared to pick her up from the airport. When she got into the car, she seemed cheerful and unaware that something was wrong with me. I just said I wasn't feeling well. Kay smiled at her and mentioned a fantastic surprise plan for her at her parents' house. I didn't utter a single word during the entire trip, trying to hide my feelings and forcing a fake smile since Bess got in the car. The rest of the day felt like it was moving in slow motion. I'd already talked to our parents the day before and let them know we were coming over. I mentioned I had a surprise announcement to share when we got there. There were hugs, smiles, and I almost changed my mind at that point. I really care about her parents. They've been incredibly kind and welcoming to me. Soon Bess was sitting on the sofa between her parents. Eventually someone asked about the big surprise and Kay encouraged me to go ahead. I began by expressing my deep affection for her parents and how grateful I was for their warm welcome into their family. Then I got choked up for a few minutes. I had a whole speech prepared, eloquent and well-composed, but I completely forgot it, so I blurted out the truth. I revealed that Bess had been cheating on me with a coworker who had kids, and his wife was 7 months pregnant. The engagement was off, the wedding was canceled, and our relationship was over. I told Bess that her belongings were in a storage container, and I dropped the key on the floor. It was a farewell forever. I left while everyone sat there in stunned silence. I heard Kay tell them that I needed time to heal and not to contact me unless absolutely necessary. In the car, Kay suggested I post the same message on our Facebook group, where we had been planning the wedding. Everyone, including both our families and friends, posted similar messages before leaving the group. Kay kept telling me he was proud of me and that one day I'd look back and be glad I stood up for myself. But at that moment, I just felt numb. Nothing about this situation felt good or real. Our next planned stop was to visit the affair partner's wife. When she opened the door, I blurted out everything without even introducing myself. I think she even slapped me at some point. As I handed her a thumb drive with the evidence, her husband appeared from behind her. His wife immediately started yelling at him to leave and not come near her. He tried making excuses, but when he took a step forward, Kay confronted him, saying, "You heard the lady, get out." After some back and forth, he eventually packed a bag and left. Kay talked to his wife for a while I was trying to process the chaos in my own mind. In the end, we were invited inside Kay's mother's house, and we agreed to stay there until her father could pick her up the next morning. She was afraid her husband might return, and she didn't want to be alone. I felt like I had become invisible. No one acknowledged me, and I sat there crying silently. I understood her situation was much worse than mine, as I wasn't married and didn't have children. Eventually, they all fell asleep, while I continued to cry quietly. I decided I wanted to end it all. I began searching for pills, but I couldn't find any. I was struggling to comprehend the situation. Her father arrived at 5:30 in the morning, and I opened the door for him. He calmly asked me some questions and checked on my well-being before going inside to find his daughter. I just stood there holding the door. Shortly after, Kay came out to talk to me. I stared at him for a moment, then passed out. I woke up in the hospital, and it's been 3 months since all this happened. Kay stayed with me during the first few weeks after I returned home because he was worried I might attempt bad things again. I haven't spoken to my ex-fiancée since. I changed my phone number, blocked her email address, and restricted access on social media. She's come to my door many times, talking through it for hours. She apologizes and begs for forgiveness. She said she ended the affair and that the affair partner's wife reported them to HR, which resulted in her losing her job. Hey guys, this marks the end of part 1 of the story. We're about to continue with part 2. But before we do, as usual, I'd like to ask those who haven't subscribed to please click that subscribe button. Your support means a lot to us and encourages us to present stories in better ways. Now let's move on to the updates. Update. I eventually decided to talk to her parents to see if they could help stop her from coming to my door. I don't care about her reasons or what she wants. I've realized that my perception of her and who she really is are entirely different. I just want her out of my life so I can move on. Before I was ready to speak to her parents, her dad came to my door. He brought a 6-pack of my favorite beer and asked if we could talk. I agreed and told him I was on my way out, suggesting we could walk and talk. I didn't want him inside, not only because my apartment was a mess, but also because I didn't want to risk her suddenly showing up at the door. He opened 2 bottles of beer and we began to chat. Initially, he apologized on behalf of his daughter and mentioned that both his wife and daughter had pressured him to talk to me. He said his daughter was spoiled and selfish, and he hoped she would finally face the full consequences of her actions and maybe become a better person in the future. I asked him if everything was okay between us, and he assured me there were no problems. He even jokingly suggested it might be time for me to get a divorce. Apparently, their confrontation didn't go well after he met me, but this time, he was determined not to back down. It seemed like a long overdue fight for him. As for Kay, he's been a great support, as always. He's been there for me, encouraging and uplifting me. Now that I'm out of it, I realize he was right. One day, I'll be proud of what I did. I stood up for myself, something I rarely do, and I feel great about it. I'd definitely do it again when necessary. My ex showed up at my door again, and this time, I actually talked to her. She begged me to let her in so we could talk. I agreed but told her I had some things to do and suggested we meet at a local park in half an hour. I didn't want her inside my messy place, fearing she might make accusations or something if we met alone. Surprisingly, I wasn't nervous. I actually felt pretty good. So I went to the park, and she was there, crying. We had some meaningless small talk, and she tried to pry into my conversation with her father. I told her that was private between us and none of her business. I was getting bored, so I asked her what she wanted to talk about, and she went on a long rant about how sorry she was and how much she loved me. I forgave her because I didn't want to carry anger, hatred, and hurt anymore. But getting back together is out of the question. People who love each other don't do what she did to me. She cried hysterically, and I watched without feeling much attachment. I called her dad to pick her up, and I told her I hoped she would seek counseling to fix whatever was broken inside her. Then I got an Uber and went to the local animal shelter, where I adopted a kitten. I named the kitten Shiny. Kay joked that he was blinded by my newfound confidence. I named the kitten Shiny as a reminder to always stand up for myself. I'm happy that I took the high road and was honest with her without yelling or name-calling. I've been playing with my amazing kitten and having a lot of fun. Kay is coming over later to play video games and have some beers. I'm still sad about my ex and I'll miss the good times we had, but I'm also relieved that this chapter of my life is over. It is what it is. Be warned. This is a straightforward tale of sadness and regret. I'm Bonnie Brown, but I was born Bonnie Betsy Lowry. My parents had high hopes for me. I married Benjamin Brown, but it didn't bring me any grace, as you might expect. At 38, I made a mess of my life. Doesn't sound old, right? Well, at the time it felt like it. You know how our society idolizes youth. You work hard, take school seriously, graduate with good grades, find a good job, marry someone great, have a few kids, and just when things are looking up, the world shifts its focus to someone younger. Actually, it wasn't one specific thing. I slowly realized that the young interns at the office were getting all the attention. Men used to flirt with me, and although I didn't let them go too far, it was fun and made me feel attractive. Then one day, that attention disappeared. Life became a series of responsibilities. Work demanded more from me, and my kids needed help with their daily tasks. There were chores, bills, and countless other things. Sure, my husband helped a lot, but I still felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. In hindsight, I might have been depressed, but I can't say for sure. All I know is that I was drowning in obligations, stuck in an unchanging routine. I must have lost my mind. I'd give anything to have that life back, even just for a day, but I can't because I've lost it all, including my soul. On March 5th, a Wednesday, I was called into the director's office. In 17 days on a Monday, I had to go to New York for a week of training. It was like my company's version of management school, a sign that they saw potential for my promotion. I was on the rise, and I eagerly shared the news with my family. They were supportive, filled with questions and encouragement. I went shopping using Ben's credit card and bought new clothes for the trip. I wanted to make a lasting impression on the up-and-coming professionals from around the country. I wanted them to remember me. Well, they certainly remember me now. Sunday arrived, and I left for the airport after a quick goodbye to my family. I thought they'd understand that I'd be busy with classes and staying at the hotel. I settled into my room, met some people during dinner, and had drinks with Janet, Donna, and Jim. Jim and I even danced. It was a refreshing change from my routine, and I convinced myself it was nothing special. But the guilt crept in, so I excused myself for the night. I realized I hadn't called home, but it was too late to make that call. Despite my emotions, I stayed focused on the classes. Every evening we met at the bar for drinks. I danced with many men, but Jim held my attention. I felt youthful once more. As the nights went on, Jim and I grew closer, maybe too close. We danced for hours, and one night we never even made it back to the dance floor. We even had a passionate encounter before parting ways. I felt young and reckless, as if I had no responsibilities. Occasionally, guilt crept in, but Jim diverted my thoughts. Looking back, he offered nothing my husband couldn't provide. His kisses weren't romantic, and his voice didn't soothe. All he gave were 2 nights of passion and a quick encounter before leaving. On the flight home, returning to my life, reality wondered me hard. I had cheated on my husband, the man I loved, with a near stranger, and I did it without remorse. Worse, I did it in front of others who silently judged me, not out of jealousy, but disappointment. In just a few days, my reputation would be ruined, and I'd be labeled as promiscuous in every office nationwide. It was only a matter of time before news of my actions reached my workplace. I worried about how to keep this from Ben. Even though he wasn't particularly close to my co-workers, he did attend company events occasionally, like Christmas parties and barbecues. Sooner or later, someone would spill the beans, and then what could I do? Somebody would eventually spill the beans? And then what would I do? Even worse, what if I had contracted a disease? Dread consumed me for the rest of the flight. It felt like my fate was sealed, and it was just a matter of time before my life, my husband, my kids, and my home were all in jeopardy. I tried to think of a way to put that week behind me, but I couldn't. Adding to the stress, I didn't even have his cell phone number. He was just a man who desired me more than those young interns, someone I could enjoy for a few days without any responsibilities. From that point on, I was walking on thin ice. The plane brought me closer to my fate, and I saw no way out except to face it and deal with the consequences. I considered telling Ben and throwing myself at his mercy, but what if he couldn't forgive me? I knew I could never forgive myself if I were in his shoes. When I finally got home, I knew that Ben would want. I'd been away for nearly a week, and turning him down would hurt him. But the fear ate away at me. What if I had contracted something during that week? If I gave it to Ben, he'd surely figure it out, and I'd be worse than anyone in his eyes. My heart raced uncontrollably, and for a moment I entertained the thought of having a heart attack, hoping it would somehow spare me from the impending disaster. But luck was not on my side. The drive home was agonizing. With every mile, it felt like I was marching toward my own doom, and I had no way to stop it. As I walked through our front door, I hoped it would still be our front door. I was greeted by the joyful cries of, "Mommy's home!" 3 children rushed to hug me, and my husband showered me with kisses. Everyone was smiling, eager to hear about my week, what I had experienced, what I had done, and what it was like. I nearly broke down right then and there, but I managed to keep my composure. What had I done? How could I tell them what I had done? I looked from child to child and saw nothing but love. My husband was thrilled by my return. Everyone was delighted to see me, and I was surrounded by love from all sides. I didn't deserve any of it. I had betrayed them all. I put on a brave face and told them all about the course, the meals, and the sights and sounds of the city. I left out the affair, how I acted in front of everyone, and my betrayal. From that evening on, I lived in fear of being discovered, and then the desire to be intimate came. I couldn't refuse without raising suspicions. I convinced myself that Jim wasn't a bad guy, that he was clean, and I resolved to be the best, most loving wife imaginable. I was determined that if Ben ever found out, his love for me would outweigh the anger and hurt, and he would forgive me. But I forgot one thing. Opus update. Fast forward 4 months, and I was starting to believe I had gotten away with it. I swore to myself I'd never repeat my mistake, never betray Ben and the kids. I was committed to being the perfect wife. Then, one day I came home, expecting to prepare dinner for the family. The house was silent. There were no voices, no activity, none of the chaos I had once taken for granted. Instead, Ben sat quietly in a chair, looking dejected, with tears streaming down his face. "Ben, what's wrong, honey? Are you okay? I received an email at work today. It seems you must have angered someone at your office, said something wrong, made them mad. Whatever you did, they really dislike you." "What did I do? I usually get along with everyone." "I don't know. I just got an email today with some cell phone photos of you at your training course. Remember when you went away for that week of training? It looks like you had a good time. It looks like the guy you were with had an especially good time." I heard my husband's words, and I wanted to deny everything. I wanted to tell him I loved him and only him, that there could never be anyone else for me but him. But I couldn't. My mind went blank, and I sat there with my mouth open, just staring into space. Was this the beginning of the end? Would I lose everything because of a week of foolishness, more than I had ever done before or would ever do again? Was my life as I knew it over? He had the proof. There were no pictures from inside the bedrooms, but he had photos of me doing things in public that I couldn't remember doing. He showed me the images, and pictures don't lie. I was dancing too closely with Jim, kissing him on the dance floor, and at our table. There was even a photograph of Jim's hand on my leg and up my skirt as we sat at the table. It was over. My fate was sealed. I confessed everything and begged for forgiveness. Ending number 1. I had to try. Tears in my eyes, I said, "Ben, I am so very sorry. I want you to know that nothing like this has ever happened before, and it will never happen again. Sweetheart, I love you so much. I love the life we have together. Please, please give me a second chance. I promise you won't regret it. I'll make you forget the one and only time I ever did something so stupid. You won't regret it. I promise." Believe it or not, that's exactly what my loving, amazing husband did or tried to do. He didn't ask for more details. He didn't make me recount my actions or explain why. He just sat there and cried for hours as he slowly withered inside. I held him, kissed him, and assured him of my love, pledging to take away his pain and never hurt him again. I did everything I could to keep that promise. So I mentioned that I forgot one thing, right? I forgot that when you break a man's heart, you can't always mend it. This man who loved me unconditionally, who existed to make me happy, was broken beyond repair. He never smiled again. He never laughed again. We sometimes made love, but it felt like his mind was elsewhere, imagining me with someone else. I did everything in my power to heal him, but it was never enough. The kids grew up, got jobs, and moved away. We still slept next to each other, but there was a quiet sadness in the house. Eventually, I realized that it wasn't just the physical affair that had ruined my life. I had shattered my husband's sense of self-worth, his feeling of being loved, and his belief that his life had meaning. I came to a crossroads. I could either leave him, giving him the chance to find another woman who could rebuild the man I had destroyed, or I could stay and try my best to be a loving wife, even if he never saw me the same way again. I knew that leaving would only confirm what my infidelity had told him, that he was worthless as a husband and a man. So I stayed, and I watched this wonderful man slowly crumble until there was little left of the man I had married. Somehow my kids found out what I had done. Ben never told them. He wouldn't do that to them or me. How they found out, I don't know, but they did. It created a rift between us that never fully healed. They witnessed their father's slow decline, and they knew it was all my fault. You see, I never went through with the divorce I had contemplated on that flight home all those years ago. But I lost my husband and my children just as surely and completely as if they had all left me and moved away. Oh, they left me all right, but they never physically went away. Ending number 2. So, as I mentioned, I forgot one important thing, didn't I? I failed to realize that when you break a man's heart, you irreversibly change him. The man who once loved me unconditionally, who existed to make me happy, was now beyond repair. He tried, really tried. We had conversations, I poured my heart out, and we even sought counseling. All I wanted was to see him happy again, to wipe away the pain and disappointment I had brought into his life. But 6 months later, we decided to call it quits. I would have done anything to make him happy for the rest of my life, to make him forget. However, he had nothing left. I had taken it all from him and cast it away. Ben didn't move far, and he remained a part of our lives almost every day. Yet, he was no longer my loving husband. He devoted his time and heart to our kids and remained polite to me. But the joy and love were gone. Betrayal has a way of erasing a man's view of his wife as something special and unique, transforming her into something ordinary, something to be scorned. I never remarried or dated. The man I loved stayed in my life, though at a distance, and that was enough to sustain me. Ending number 3. 6 months later, it seemed like we were on the path to recovery. Those had been 6 tough, guilt-ridden months. Life at home was far from normal, yet the anger had subsided, and both of us cried less often. I'm certain there were moments when he considered giving up, but he never did. And I wouldn't either. I was ready to apologize for the rest of my life. However, in a therapy session, there came a day when Ben turned to me with a profound sadness in his eyes and said, "You messed up, but it's time to stop now. I don't need your apologies anymore. I hope you never stop feeling remorse, but we both need to move forward." At that moment, I thought it was the end for us. The words "move forward" echoed in my mind, and I was convinced he was asking for a divorce. But then he continued, "I love you, Bonnie. I despise what you did. And if I ever see that guy again, I might want to punch him. But I want the woman I married back in my life. I want her back in my bed to see her smile and hear her laughter. I want to grow old with her. We'll never forget what happened, but we can try to forgive." Tears welled up in his eyes. The rest of that session remains a blur in my memory. I clung to my husband, hugging and kissing him, crying and thanking him over and over. I was so afraid when he started speaking that I couldn't let go of him, fearing it might be the last time. There were moments when I could see the pain in his eyes, and I understood what he was thinking. We never needed to say a word. I would simply go to him, stand beside him, or sit next to him, hugging him as if it were our last embrace. waiting until I saw him smile again. It always brought tears to my eyes even now, because I know he carries that pain with him. I hurt this man deeply for no good reason, yet he forgave me. I will spend the rest of my life being the wife he truly deserves and offering prayers of gratitude for the second chance I received. On that significant day in August 2005, my friend, an 18-year-old high school graduate, burst into the door of our cozy two-room apartment, and I couldn't believe my incredible luck. Her lifelong dream of becoming an actress had always seemed quite achievable to me, given her undeniable beauty and exceptional talent. This was unsurprising, considering her vibrant cheerleading background and active involvement in various school drama productions throughout her school years. With her whole future ahead of her, the acting profession appeared to be a reachable reality. While my girlfriend had always been resolute about pursuing a career as an actress, I was still contemplating the direction of my own life. I wasn't particularly interested in college and was content working at McDonald's, allowing my girlfriend to take the lead. However, that day marked a turning point. Filled with excitement, she shared the news that she had secured a minor role in a highly acclaimed blockbuster film. It was an incredible development. Though she only had 2 lines to deliver, it felt like a monumental step toward fulfilling her dream. She explained that the lead role in this fantastic opportunity was being played by a regular customer from Hooters restaurant. After promising her a role, and even booking a ticket to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I unquestionably believed in the opportunity that had arisen. Despite my naivety, I refrained from asking how she had managed to land such an incredible chance. In the evening, we gathered with friends to celebrate this momentous occasion. Each moment brought us closer to the allure and grandeur of Hollywood. Eager to have me accompany her on this journey, she reached out to a mysterious sponsor who generously purchased a ticket for me as well. Her happiness was infectious, and I had never seen her so elated before. Upon arriving in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we were met with opulence. Checking into a luxurious hotel for 4 days was a thrilling experience. While my girlfriend was occupied with her scenes for 2 of those days, I didn't mind. I made the most of the opportunity, soaking up the atmosphere of stunning beaches and basking in the warm sun. The remaining days felt like an uninterrupted vacation, filled with beach excursions, lively parties, and even encounters with celebrities involved in the film production. It was like a dream come true. All of this served as motivation that fueled our desire for the glamorous lifestyle that the film industry offered. Upon returning to Pennsylvania, we couldn't shake off the allure of that world. We knew that our path led to Los Angeles, where my friend could wholeheartedly pursue her dreams in the film industry. Her time in St. Vincent and the Grenadines had allowed her to forge valuable connections with influential individuals. Furthermore, she firmly believed that upon our return to Pennsylvania, we should use the $15,300 she earned to embark on this incredible journey. Using a portion of her earnings from the film, we managed to secure a modest apartment in Los Angeles, brimming with hope and anticipation. We were stepping into a new chapter of our lives. Days turned into months, and my girlfriend faced the challenging task of securing significant film roles in this bustling city. Every morning, she woke up early and attended auditions in the hope of achieving a long-awaited breakthrough. Unfortunately, she mainly came across minor roles in local business advertisements that offered meager compensation, falling short of our expectations. As her earnings from the movie role began to dwindle, we found ourselves needing to invest in new clothing and photographs for auditions. Recognizing the need to support ourselves, I decided to take a job at a fast food restaurant. It may not have been glamorous, but it provided us with the opportunity to start earning money and sustain our livelihood. As our savings dwindled, I witnessed her hopes and dreams gradually fade in her eyes. Every evening we returned home burdened by the weight of rejections and disappointments, as she came face to face with the harsh realities and fierce competition of the film industry in Los Angeles. In our small Pennsylvania town, she had been considered the epitome of beauty. But in this sprawling city, beauty was commonplace. Months turned into nearly a year, and she still couldn't secure a substantial role for herself. The clothing she bought was now secondhand, and prospects for advancement seemed uncertain. Eventually, she took a job as a shopping mall model, a significant departure from our lofty aspirations. Nevertheless, it allowed, albeit with difficulty, for the bills to be paid. During this period, I found my own path in life as a fitness trainer. Balancing 2 jobs, one at a restaurant and the other training numerous clients, I aimed to provide stability and support. Our lives were consumed by individual pursuits, and as a result, we seldom found time for each other. Our dreams of success in the entertainment industry appeared to be slipping away, overshadowed by the demands of our busy lives. With each passing day, our dreams seemed to grow more distant. The unforgiving nature of the film and entertainment industry began to wear down my girlfriend's spirit, and I could only helplessly watch as she confronted the harsh reality that achieving success in Hollywood was far from the easy dream we had once envisioned. As time passed, her excessive spending drained our finances completely, and we began to struggle to make ends meet. I became increasingly frustrated with her for depleting our savings at an alarming rate. Finally, we managed to replenish our depleted savings. It happened unexpectedly when I was rummaging through her purse searching for something and stumbled upon a bundle of $1,500. Intrigued, I couldn't help but inquire about where she had obtained such a large sum of money. She appeared flustered, but explained that a photographer she met at the mall had invited her to take pictures at his lavish mansion. I couldn't resist asking why she hadn't mentioned it earlier, to which she replied that she had intended to, but somehow forgot. Curiosity got the better of me, and I continued my questioning, wanting to ensure the legitimacy of her earnings. She assured me that everything was fine. However, as she spoke of her best photos and posing in various outfits for professional photographers, doubt began to creep into my mind. Despite our naive understanding of the industry, I couldn't ignore suspicions about the potential for exploitation or ulterior motives. After all, we had heard stories of people in Hollywood willing to pay exorbitant sums for almost anything. I grew curious and asked her to show me the photos. To my surprise, she mentioned that producers rarely provided copies, and it would take some time before anything would be known about the photo shoots. In my naivety, I accepted her explanation without delving deeper into the matter. This situation persisted for the next 2 years. She frequently returned home late at night, attributing it to earning money by frequenting clubs and occupying VIP seats. She often claimed that her involvement in these projects was limited to gatherings in the VIP section. In other instances, she explained that some producers preferred conducting auditions and shooting scenes during the nighttime. However, as her nocturnal escapades became more frequent, a sense of unease settled within me. Worries about her safety and the company she kept began to overwhelm me. She tried to allay my concerns, arguing that she wasn't the only one engaging in such activities and that many of her friends were compensated similarly. But suspicions persisted in my mind, causing me to question the reality of her actions. Over time, I began to take notice of the company she was keeping, which primarily consisted of individuals typically associated with the adult film industry. Yet, in my naivety, I believed they were simply models. She defended herself by explaining that she had no control over her work schedule, as producers dictated her whereabouts and responsibilities. I tried to logically assess the situation, convincing myself that some producers might genuinely prefer nighttime shoots. All of this seemed to align logically with my limited understanding of the industry. One day, while taking a smoke break near our apartment, a pivotal moment occurred that shattered my illusions. A man in a large SUV pulled up and dropped her off right in front of our house. In that moment, my views on her nocturnal adventures were called into question, leaving me stunned. Shocked by what I witnessed, I couldn't muster the courage to immediately confront her. Instead, I went inside the house and discreetly observed her through the blinds as she entered. Anxiety gripped me at that moment. With a determined decision to uncover the truth about her activities, I secretly planned to follow her the next Friday when she went out. On that Friday, she went on a date with her friends, and I quietly began trailing her. In the end, she ended up at a club with a long line outside. To my surprise, the club's promoter granted my girlfriend and her friends special privileges, allowing them to bypass the long queue and enter the establishment swiftly. In my quest for answers, I reluctantly had to bribe a bouncer generously to gain entry. Inside the club, I carefully scanned the crowd, desperately searching for her. Finally, I spotted her in the VIP section, chatting animatedly and enjoying drinks with her friends. It seemed to match her earlier explanation, and I lingered there for a while. As I began to grow tired and prepare to leave, doubts about the man in the SUV still nagged at me. But those doubts quickly vanished when I realized it was just an Uber Black, and I felt foolish for suspecting betrayal. After scolding myself for being paranoid, I convinced myself that everything was fine and returned to my normal routine. At the time, I worked as a fitness trainer and also dabbled in multi-level marketing, selling dietary supplements and insurance. Thankfully, my average earnings covered rent and my living expenses. When I took charge of managing my own finances, I couldn't help but notice changes in my girlfriend's behavior and appearance. She became more secretive about her financial matters, which raised concerns for me. Occasionally, she displayed aggression toward me, only to apologize later, claiming it was unintentional. Furthermore, she started concealing her finances and paid less attention to her spending, leaving me questioning her financial habits. Despite initially trying to brush these concerns aside, I couldn't ignore the significant decline in her financial stability. She began losing a considerable amount of weight, hardly ate, showed signs of excessive nervousness, and experienced sleep problems. She often slept for extended periods, causing me to worry about her well-being. In my attempt to address her health issues, I made sure she ate properly, attributing her behavior to stress. However, one night as I woke up, I noticed she wasn't in our bed. Baffled, I followed the noise coming from the bathroom, driven by anxiety. To my horror, I discovered my girlfriend using a prohibited substance in the bathroom. I stumbled upon a stash of illegal substances which caught her by surprise. In a panic, she attempted to hide everything but ended up spilling it on the floor. Her desperate actions to salvage the substances resembled a beggar clutching at scattered money. It marked a turning point in our relationship. Overwhelmed by emotions, both of us broke down in tears. She sincerely apologized and pledged to seek help and undergo rehabilitation immediately. It felt as though she had journeyed to Los Angeles, but lost not only herself, but also our connection along the way. Unflinchingly addressing her issues, she bravely kept her promise and checked into a rehabilitation center the very next day. Throughout her month-long stay at the clinic, she displayed genuine remorse and determination, clinging to the hope of overcoming this dark phase and resurrecting her dream. When she completed her rehabilitation program and returned home, she appeared revitalized and filled with newfound strength and resolve. A wave of relief washed over me. Her return was particularly significant as my birthday approached. We had a tradition of going all out for each other's birthdays, always striving to outdo ourselves and create unforgettable celebrations. One day she came home, casually tossing her purse next to me, and went to the bathroom. Curiosity got the better of me, and a few days before my birthday, I decided to search her bag. To my astonishment, I stumbled upon a CD labeled Pilot, and excitement and anticipation surged through me. Without hesitation, I popped it into the DVD player, eager to discover its contents, anticipating it might be a surprise related to me, or perhaps footage of a screen test she attended. I was utterly shocked and filled with anger as the unexpected truth unfolded on the screen. The video showed my girlfriend engaging in intimate activities with another man. It was an image I could hardly fathom. Overwhelmed by emotions, I stormed into the bathroom where she was showering, venting my anger and demanding an immediate explanation for her involvement in such actions. As she emerged from the shower, I noticed she was trembling, and she offered heartfelt apologies. She admitted that what I witnessed was initially meant as a one-time encounter, but had spiraled out of control. I could scarcely comprehend her words. Confused and in search of clarity, I asked her how long she had been involved in this industry. Reluctantly, she confessed that it had been ongoing for over a year. My confusion deepened when she struggled to provide an exact count of how many times she had participated in such activities. Citing the frequency blurred the boundaries and made it hard to keep track. What struck me even more was that the dates and timestamps on the videos coincided with the period when I believed she was in a rehabilitation center seeking help, not pursuing adult films for financial gain. Determined to rebuild my life, I cut off all contact with my ex-girlfriend and focused on my career as a fitness trainer and my involvement in multi-level marketing. Unfortunately, the latter turned out to be a pyramid scheme that was eventually shut down by authorities, dashing my hopes. Undeterred, I decided to invest my savings in opening a gym. However, the high expenses in California posed a significant challenge. Opting to join the Planet Fitness franchise, I seized the opportunity to open a small gym in my Pennsylvania hometown before leaving California. Wanting to be transparent, I reached out to my ex-girlfriend to inform her of my departure. Despite our breakup 6 months earlier, our connection remained strong, and our phone conversation stirred up emotions in both of us. She spoke of feeling abandoned, emphasizing that I had brought her to California and then abandoned her when she needed me most. Her words left me speechless, and I found myself immersed in memories of our shared youth and the dreams we once held together. Having made the decision to return to my hometown, I took the initiative to establish the Planet Fitness Center. As the business began to thrive, I also found solace in close relationships that brought joy and fulfillment back into my life. However, over time I heard unsettling rumors that my ex-girlfriend had turned to a life of street-based solicitation to support her illegal substance use. Initially skeptical, I decided to investigate and discover the truth firsthand. What I uncovered left me utterly shocked. The person I once knew had become a mere shell, devoid of the vibrant soul I had cherished. About 2 years after the opening of my gym, the situation took an unexpected turn. Everything had been going smoothly for me. The membership at my gym kept growing and it seemed like life was on a positive trajectory. But then, an unexpected and devastating piece of news reached me. My ex-girlfriend had passed away while with a client, having consumed an excessive amount of a prohibited substance. The moment I received this heart-wrenching information, chills ran down my spine, and I rushed home. Unable to contain my emotions, I sat on the shower floor, overcome by uncontrollable grief and tears. To this day, I still carry guilt and never cease to wonder if I could have done something differently. Despite reassurances from my therapist, pain and regret continued to weigh heavily on my heart.
I cheated and lost my husband's trust completely. He won to even let me touch him anymore. Help! I'm in a unique situation and want to know if anyone else has experienced something similar. I'm not the wounded person here. My husband, kids, and parents bear the burden of my past mistakes, for which I am genuinely sorry. Let me be straightforward. About 19 months ago, I was caught having an affair with a married neighbor and father of 3. I'm a 32-year-old woman, my husband is 39, and the neighbor, whom I'll call Steve for confidentiality, was 27 at the time. I made a terrible mistake having the affair with Steve, which began a little over 2 years ago. While the affair lasted nearly 5 months before being exposed, I was physically with Steve only 4 times in total. I know it's hard to believe, but I swear it's true. Well, let me tell you something, I don't believe it. To address questions about my marriage that I'm sure everyone reading this has, were we having issues? Did I not love my husband? Was I unhappy? The answer is a definite no to all those questions. I was completely content and fulfilled in my marriage, and I love my husband and our 2 boys, ages 9 and 11, more than anything in the world. Jim satisfied me emotionally, mentally, and physically. He was everything I ever dreamed of and more. My attraction to Steve was misplaced and stemmed from a deep place that took me back to my first romantic encounter at 18. It was a wild attraction, just like my first time. It was like a wild animal instinct inside me that drove me to this. In high school, I dated 4 boys, but nothing serious beyond a quick kiss at the end of the night. In fact, I considered all those guys as friends since we all grew up together. One day, I was invited to a barbecue at a friend's parents' place where I met Charles. Charles was my friend's cousin, and from the first time I saw him, I was captivated, I was taken. At the time, he was 20 and I was 18. From the moment we met, we couldn't keep our eyes off each other. I don't know what it was, but there was something between us that drew me to him like a magnet to steel or a magnet to metal. We started talking at the barbecue and he had to leave for work, so we exchanged numbers. The next day, on Sunday, we met for ice cream in the evening and took a walk. We talked for hours, totally engrossed with each other, and just spontaneously started kissing. He invited me back to his apartment, and there I had my first experience. Something about Charles excited me and made me want to give him every part of me. To this day, I can't describe it. It was subconscious. I couldn't resist. Beyond the physical relationship, we had nothing in common. In fact, we were incompatible. I ended things with Charles 11 months later, after the passion wore off. A year later, I met my now husband Jim. He checked all my boxes, and I knew he was the one. We got married a year later, and our marriage had been 13 years of joy until I ruined it. We were blessed with 2 wonderful boys who are the spitting image of their dad and share his awesome personality. I'm sharing these details to explain why I started a relationship with Steve. Steve and his wife Marcia moved into our neighborhood, and they were the youngest couple. My husband and I are the second youngest, with the others mostly in their 60s. Everyone warmly welcomed Steve and Marcia. They were invited to a neighborhood picnic where Steve and I first noticed each other, similar to when I first met Charles at a family barbecue a long time ago. The next time I saw Steve was at the car dealership where he worked in finance. We were looking for a new SUV, and when my husband found out Steve worked there, they started talking. We went the next week to check out cars. Steve made sure we got a good deal, and he arranged great financing. Throughout the closing process, Steve and I exchanged glances, but my husband didn't notice. A few days later, I had to bring the vehicle back for mud flaps, and that's when Steve and I had our first inappropriate meeting. He greeted me in the lounge, and then, in his office, he mentioned additional financing details. We chatted, and he confessed he wanted to talk to me alone about his feelings. I admitted I felt something too, but it was wrong. He knew it was wrong but didn't care. He wanted me. Fast forward to the next morning, when we had our first close encounter at his house after our kids went to school and our spouses left for work. By the way, my husband has a good job, and Marcia is a licensed practical nurse. Steve and I only had physical relations 4 times in the entire 5-month period. There was no love connection, as I loved Jim, and Steve loved Marcia. What we had was just physical, and to be honest, it wasn't as good as what I had with my husband, not even close. But it was forbidden, and therefore thrilling and dangerous. Looking back now, being a stay-at-home mom for 11 years made me desperate for attention from this attractive younger man. I thought I could have this secret adventure and still maintain a loving marriage with my husband. That idea came crashing down one Thursday morning 19 months ago, when Steve and I were caught in bed at his house by Marcia's mother. She walked in on us fully engaged and started screaming obscenities. She slapped and scratched Steve, leaving a large gash with her nails. She also hit me square on the jaw and pulled out 2 handfuls of my hair before I could gather my clothes and leave the house. When I got home, I was completely shocked by what had just happened, and the reality of my actions sank in. I realized my perfect marriage to Jim was forever changed and could end because of this. I sat silently for a couple of hours, just staring at the walls, wondering how to tell my husband. Eventually, I decided to call him and left an urgent message stating that I had something very important to discuss. He didn't respond. So I texted him but still got no reply. A few minutes later, Marcia and her mother showed up on our front porch, knocking on the door and bay windows, screaming for me to answer. Terrified and thoroughly embarrassed, I didn't respond. Luckily, my boys were at school when this happened. After they left, I lay down on the couch, crying. I briefly fell asleep but woke up to the sound of a car door in the driveway. I looked out and saw my husband. I rushed to freshen up before going back into the living room to greet him. When he opened the door, however, he didn't enter. Instead, I saw through the window that he was walking down the street towards Steve and Marcia's house. I watched as he spent nearly 3 hours there before coming home. I went to hug him, but he kept me away. I started apologizing, but he said my apology wasn't accepted and he wanted me to leave. I fell to the floor, crying and begging, telling him I didn't want to go, but he insisted. He then called my mother, explained what I'd done, and asked her to come over and pick me up. Mom came over, apologized to Steve, convinced me to go back to her house for the night, and helped me pack some clothes. I left, crying, asking Jim what he would tell the kids. He said he would take care of it. I left, brokenhearted and ashamed. That night, I called Jim, and to my surprise, he answered. He just said hello and went silent. I identified myself, apologized, and promised never to do something like this again. I expressed my commitment to spend the rest of my life making it up to him. Jim remained silent, asking if I had anything more to say. I said no and asked him about his feelings. He told me he knew what he was feeling, and I started crying. He then said he wanted me to stay at my parents' house for a couple of weeks before coming home. I reluctantly agreed, but asked when I would get to see him and the boys again. He said he didn't want to see me now, but agreed to a brief call every evening at 9. The first call ended with me saying I love you, and Jim saying nothing, just hanging up. The next night's call went the same way, with me apologizing and Jim staying silent until I stopped talking. He then dropped a bomb saying he wanted a divorce. Hearing this, I broke down and begged him for another chance. He refused, acknowledging he'd lose half his hard-earned assets. Then he unexpectedly said he'd give me everything he owns if I just disappeared and left him and the boys alone. I broke down again, insisting he didn't mean that, but he affirmed that he did. We ended the call, and I cried all night. I then started thinking of how I could make him stay and came up with a plan to offer him a post-nuptial agreement so favorable he couldn't refuse it. All I wanted was a second chance to prove my love, regardless of the cost. The following week, while Jim met with his divorce attorney, I consulted my own lawyer, not to prepare for divorce, but to create a post-nuptial agreement to present to Jim before receiving the divorce papers. I visited 4 different attorneys before finding one who specialized in post-nuptial agreements and was willing to create such a lopsided agreement. Lopsided in that my husband would receive nearly all the benefit in exchange for remaining married to me for a period, giving me a second chance at love. Unfortunately, Jim's lawyer completed the divorce papers in just 11 days, and I was served at my parents' house 2 days later. I had Jim served with the proposed postnuptial agreement. We talked that night after he read the proposal. He was a bit surprised at what I had offered, and for the first time, I could sense the caring person I once knew coming through, not the angry man who had been so robotic and cold for the past 2 weeks. The agreement is a complete win for Jim, and an opportunity for me to prove I'm worth keeping. I won't go into specific details about the postnuptial, but I can confirm that it allows Jim to keep nearly all our marital assets if we stay married and live together for at least 30 months. Also, if I'm unfaithful again and we divorce, I lose all claims on our marital assets, get nothing, and forego any alimony and child support payments. The agreement also requires me to get a full-time job within the next 6 months and contribute to our household expenses. Finally, my husband can see other women if he chooses throughout the remainder of our marriage. I know Jim would never be unfaithful, it's not in him, but I want him to know I love him enough to give him this option. To my surprise and delight, Jim accepted the offer with one additional stipulation. The clause Jim wanted added stated there is no requirement for us to sleep together or have any type of cohabitation coitus during the remainder of our marriage. I was saddened and hesitant to agree to this, but I finally did, feeling that with time I could win back his respect, trust, and passionate love. Things have not gone as I thought, and that's why I'm here. We are now 17.5 months into our second marriage, as I call it, and our relationship is one of being housemates raising our boys. Don't get me wrong, I thank God every day for the second chance I've been given. But what we have wouldn't qualify as a marriage. It's more like we are two divorced people cohabitating. Since my affair, Jim has shown absolutely no affection towards me whatsoever. I mean nothing, not even a kiss or a hug. He won't even let me near him to express any type of affection. Although I do get in for a hug and a kiss occasionally before he can block me, but I can tell he doesn't like it, so I don't do it very often. Even so, he requires me to submit monthly to AT, home STD testing. Also, since the affair, Jim will not go out in public with me, even to family events. When our boys have games, we alternate who takes them. When it's my turn, Jim shows up at the games but doesn't sit with me. Instead, he normally stands on the sidelines with other fathers and acts like I'm not there. The only time we go out together is when we go out of town or on vacations, which we do often. When we travel, he orders adjoining rooms with 2 queen beds each. The boys stay in one room, and we stay in the other in separate beds. I look forward to every trip, as these are the times we are closest and where I've almost been able to break through to him. I told Jim about this and suggested we move from our neighborhood to start fresh. However, Jim said he'd only move if he gets a job promotion requiring relocation otherwise. He plans to stay until our boys finish high school. The boys also don't want to move because all their friends live nearby, as do Jim's friends. Since the affair, I lost all my friendships in the neighborhood. Steve and Marcia divorced 8 months after D-Day, but Marcia and her kids still live down the street. The neighborhood women I was once close to cut me off, blaming me for breaking up the family. Now my home feels like a prison, and I rarely go outside, staying inside or in my backyard, tending to my gardens. My boys are often out with their friends in the neighborhood, including Marcia and Steve's kids, but thankfully, their world hasn't changed much. Jim follows a similar routine, hanging out with neighborhood men, smoking cigars, and sipping bourbon at night, either at our house or theirs. After work, the guys enjoy relaxing together. Jim goes to work, hits the gym, and then comes home, usually avoiding the dinner I make. On weekends, he grills and only eats what he cooks, not my dishes. Weekday dinners with my boys have become a great bonding experience. We eat around 4 when they get home from school, setting the table, helping with final food prep and cleaning up together. This time has brought us closer, teaching valuable skills even in the garden, where we've created an awesome space. In summary, some things in my life are great, while others are awful. I'm unsure whether this marriage is worth continuing in its current state, or if I should let Jim go now and provide financial benefits. Deep down, I know he's not happy, and no longer sees me as his wife or lover, just as a CO parent. I love Jim a lot and will carry the burden of what I did for the rest of my life. I want to return to the loving relationship we once had, but I doubt he'll allow it. Please let me know what you think I should do. I'd appreciate any suggestions on how to successfully earn back my husband's love and trust after betraying him so brazenly. Thank you, Amy. Update. Last month, I followed the advice and decided to temporarily move out of the house to give our marriage some space. I rented a furnished apartment nearby and have been living there since. While I miss being with my husband and boys, and I miss my gardens, it's a relief to be away from that neighborhood. There are too many bad memories and vibes there, all of which I know are my fault. I'm not making excuses for what I did. When I told Jim about my decision, he seemed surprised and a bit saddened, asking many questions. His reaction showed me a lot, indicating that he still loves me. I could see it in his eyes. I pick up my boys after school, and they come over to my apartment for dinner and spend the night a few days a week. Jim and I are flexible about it, and the kids can come and go freely between our places. The main challenge now is that being out of the house means I don't see Jim much, and I'm not in a position to talk to him. So I end up calling him, asking silly questions multiple times a week just to stay connected. We've had several lengthy conversations about various things recently, another sign that he still loves me. I know I love him. That's all for now. Thanks and take care. Update: what a journey. Life is like a roller coaster with its ups and downs. Unfortunately, after 2 years into our second marriage, Jim decided that it's best for us to get a divorce. Jim mentioned that he still loves me and might want to rekindle a romantic relationship in the future, but he believes it's challenging to do while we're married. He explained it's something psychological. He feels disrespected and betrayed while still married, but thinks he can let go of those feelings after the divorce. Jim suggested we celebrate our divorce once it's final, possibly even spending the night together. While it might sound like a strange way to part with guilt, I'm willing to go along with it if it means keeping Jim in my life as a partner, lover, and friend. Jim made it clear that even if we reconnect, we won't get remarried. He believes a binding contract isn't necessary if we truly love each other. I agree with that, but I do wish there was a way to do this without divorcing. Regarding the divorce, I've decided to let him keep 3/4 of our marital assets voluntarily, despite him not meeting the postnup stipulations. I won't pursue alimony or child support. Some may criticize me for being generous, but I believe he earned the money and would have given it all to me if I had remained faithful. I'm at peace with this decision and can live comfortably for the next 8 years or more without working. Currently, I am working, so things are even better financially. I want to offer advice to women struggling with temptation as I have. My suggestion is to resist it. The thrill is not worth the risk. If you find it challenging to control yourself, seek professional help. From my experience, the short-term high is not worth the long-term loss of love, respect, and trust. I'm a 32-year-old guy married to Kat. We've been together for the past 2 years, dating for 2 years before getting married. Recently, things have not been going well between us. The trouble started 2 months ago when my wife suggested we open up our marriage to add excitement. I was surprised by her suggestion. I never thought she'd bring it up. I want to clarify that I'm not trying to control her, but given our history, it's tough for me to believe she's interested in trying this. Let's face it, open marriage is risky and often ends up hurting one or both partners. I told her clearly that I'm not comfortable with an open marriage. It's not that I'm against trying new things or spicing up our married life, but I want those things to stay within the boundaries of a closed marriage, with no third person involved. She was disappointed because it's rare for me to deny her something. I love her a lot and usually go along with her requests, even if it means making compromises. Although she didn't say anything after our conversation, I could sense that she was not happy about it. I wanted to get to the bottom of the situation and understand her reasoning. I began questioning my abilities in bed. I wanted to talk to her, but she remained silent. Kat is a consultant with a busy work schedule, often working in different time zones, which disrupts her work-life balance. While I also have a hectic work schedule, it doesn't require me to go beyond our time zone, making it easier for me. Due to her work schedule, I couldn't discuss my concerns with her. I blamed myself for impulsively saying no to her. I should have asked for more information before making a decision. I felt terrible. Nearly 2 weeks later, I got home early from work one day and made her favorite meal for dinner. She was happy with my gesture. We hugged and spent quality time together. I took that opportunity to ask her about her suggestion for an open marriage. She immediately became frustrated, accusing me of playing mind games. I didn't trick her. I just wanted to spend time with her and understand her perspective on open marriage. That's it. I got upset with her accusations and asked her directly if I was not meeting her needs. After that, she opened up. She told me about interns in her office who are fresh out of college and in their early 20s. They party a lot and hook up whenever they can. Their adventurous stories planted the idea of an open marriage in her mind. She admitted to feeling a fear of missing out when her young colleagues talked about their exciting lives. I listened to her and understood her point of view. It's natural for people to be influenced by tempting things. I told her I'm not comfortable with the idea of an open marriage because I cherish our relationship. Our bond means a lot to me. Before I met Kat, I also lived a wild life in my 20s, doing the same things as others, but I went through the emotional challenges that everyone does. Excitement can fade, leaving behind emptiness. Finding comfort in Kat after meeting her, I didn't want to go back to my old life. We got married, and she was the one I envisioned a family and growing old with. I openly shared my thoughts on open marriage with her, suggesting we reconsider if she was genuinely interested. However, she immediately denied it, though she seemed to understand. I thought she agreed with, my opinion during our conversation, but I was mistaken. Everything seemed normal for a few days, but after about a week, her behavior changed drastically. She started acting cold, attributing it to work stress. Recently, she's been behaving terribly, throwing tantrums over trivial things and mocking me as outdated. When I asked her about it, she explained that I'm too stubborn in sticking to my beliefs and not keeping up with trends. I questioned what she meant by following the trend, as I stay updated with fashion, music, and web series. I asked if my reluctance for an open marriage upset her, and she simply nodded, leaving me confused. Throughout this time, her work schedule became busier with more late nights. Initially, it was only a few days a month, but now she's coming home late almost every other day, sometimes even at dawn. When I confronted her, she mentioned aiming for a promotion, proving her worth for the position. While I admire her ambition, I worry about the truth. Honestly, I'm hesitant to entertain negative thoughts or jump to conclusions. Yesterday, something happened that prompted me to share my feelings and seek advice from the community. I reached home earlier than usual and decided to prepare Kat's favorite lasagna for dinner. Despite her late night plans, I wanted to surprise her. I messaged her, and she responded that she'd be late, maybe after midnight, dampening my enthusiasm. I spent the next hour playing video games, hungry but wanting to have dinner with Kat. An urge led me to pick her up from the office, something I'd never done before unless we had plans after work. Thinking it would be a nice surprise, I rushed to her office, a standalone building easy to spot, waiting outside for 30 to 45 minutes. It was 12:30 a.m., but there was no sign of Kat. Worried, I went upstairs to inquire at the reception. The office was still bustling with night, shift employees, and the receptionist informed me that Kat had already left. I regretted the idea and drove back home, only to find she wasn't there either. Concerned for her safety, cheating was the last thing on my mind. I was more worried about her well-being. It was too late to reach out to any of Kat's work friends, and since she had only joined the company 6 months ago, I didn't have their contact information. I felt unsure about what to do. Exhausted and anxious, I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up with the first light of the sun, I hurried to my room on impulse. I found Kat comfortably sleeping in bed. I rushed to her, tucked her in, and went back to sleep. In the morning, she was already getting ready for work. I asked when she had come home last night, and she mentioned it was around 3 a.m. due to a busy day at work, including a meeting with an Asian client. Curious, I inquired about when she left the office, and she casually said around 2:30 a.m., leaving me shocked. Her response raised concerns. Either the receptionist gave me incorrect information about Kat not being at the office around 12:30 a.m., or Kat was lying about being there until 2:30 a.m. Still feeling dizzy from the previous night's stress, I didn't press further. She called me in the afternoon, asking if I had been to her office. The receptionist had informed her about my midnight visit. I wondered about the receptionist's unusual working hours, but explained why I had gone to her office. She was silent for a moment, then clarified that she had left her office in the afternoon for a meeting at her client's U.S. office in another part of the city. This explained why she wasn't in her office when I checked. I was puzzled by her explanation. She elaborated that her client was an Asian company with a U.S. office where she participated in Zoom calls with employees in the Asian time zone. Despite this being a common practice worldwide, I felt confused about my own situation. I'm at a loss and don't know what to do next. Should I wait for things to settle or confront Kat again with my doubts? I've confronted her multiple times in the past. Any suggestions or advice would be appreciated. Update: I received some shocking news. Please bear with me as I vent. I attempted various ways to access Kat's emails or her phone's password, but she kept it very private. I tried hard to come up with ideas to uncover the truth, but I didn't succeed. In the last 2 weeks, Kat continued to come home late from work, and we were both giving each other the cold shoulder, with very few occasional and transactional conversations. 2 days ago, she was talking to her mom, who has been dealing with kidney problems for the past few years, and her recent blood test results were not good. While she was on the bed talking to her mom, I, out of concern, took her phone to check on her mom. While she narrated her tiresome routine of tests and medicine, something clicked in my head. I peeked at the unlocked phone screen with chat notifications. I got up, walked into the room while talking to her mom, casually entered the washroom while on the phone, and locked the door. I put the phone on speaker, pretended to listen, and read the messages through the notification. The notification revealed that Kat was supposed to meet someone that day for a fun ride. I opened her social media messages, and you were right, she was having an affair. She was involved with these inexperienced coworkers. After a couple of minutes, she realized I took her phone into the washroom, and she started knocking on the door to get it back. I didn't have enough time to read all the conversations, so I quickly scanned her gallery for concrete proof. The gallery was filled with explicit pictures of my beautiful wife in compromising positions with her CO workers. I emailed those pictures to myself and deleted the history. She's cheating on me with multiple colleagues. I felt so sick that I wanted to throw up. Meanwhile, my wife kept knocking on the door asking for her phone back. I couldn't stand to hear her nagging voice. I unlocked the door, swiftly handed her the phone, and locked the washroom again. Initially, I wanted to rush out and confront her right away, but instead I calmed myself down and let the anger pass. The chat notifications contained details about the location and the time they were supposed to meet that day. Leaving the washroom, I grabbed the car keys and drove to that location. While leaving the house, she faintly called my name, but I didn't bother to turn back. At the hotel, I chose the darkest table in the lobby, not to cause a scene, but to observe how comfortable she was on her way to cheat. She was supposed to be there at 5 p.m., and I arrived at 3, downing countless shots by 5. I had initially hoped to confront her at home, but God knows what I was thinking. Maybe too numb and unready for a face-off. Not even in the lobby. By 6, she didn't show up. I thought she might have sensed my presence and changed the location. Nevertheless, I was too drunk and drained to think clearly. I sat there, continuing to drink. Around 7, I saw Kat. At that sight, my world crumbled. My vision blurred after 4 hours of drinking. I faintly remembered what happened next. Reacting in autopilot mode, I got up, staggered to the reception area where she was registering her entry, tapped her on the shoulder, and said, "Good luck with your fun ride." I might have said more, but this is the summarized version. She held my hand, attempting to explain, but I don't recall her words. I do remember shrugging her off, freeing my arms from her grasp, and storming out of the hotel. I hailed a cab to my friend's place and passed out at his door. The next thing I remember is waking up on my friend's couch yesterday afternoon. I slept for 16 hours straight. It was Sunday afternoon. My friend Lee made me some lunch along with fresh lemonade. I poured out my entire story to him. He advised me to freeze joint accounts, change passwords, and get an STD check immediately. For someone betrayed so badly, money and all these privacy checks were the least of my concerns. I reached out to my dead phone, plugged it in, and switched it on. The screen flooded with notifications, 100 missed calls, 50 voicemails, and countless pleading messages. I ignored it all. After a few minutes, calls and messages from her started again. I blocked her on all platforms. I felt so disgusted that I didn't even read her messages and emails completely. Today is Monday. I've called in sick for the next few days at my office. I don't know how to deal with this. I've been drinking heavily and want to run away from all of this. I don't know what to do now. My friend is searching for some of the best lawyers in the vicinity. Update, I recommended securing our shared accounts, changing passwords for sensitive information, and getting tested for STDs. Thankfully, the test results were negative. Lee assisted me in finding a lawyer, and I shared all the pictures from Kat's phone with him. I temporarily settled with Lee until the divorce is finalized, which worked out well since he needed a roommate. Throughout this time, Kat has been trying to reach me, pleading for us to get back together and start anew. She also contacted Lee, asking for his help in reconciling our marriage. According to her, the hookups were meaningless, and she was just exploring her desires, wanting to feel attractive. I'm uncertain about these Gen Z concepts of desirability and whether the whole idea is genuine or not. A few days after my last update, I sent Lee to my house with keys to collect my belongings, hoping Kat would be at the office on a regular workday. However, Lee found her at home, where she broke down and sought his help. Lee was clever enough to inform her that I was staying in a hotel, not at his place, to avoid any potential drama. Kat informed Lee that she had quit her job, revealing that it all began when interns at work started flirting with her. They made her feel desired and beautiful again, leading her to try various experiences, including illicit ones. Initially, it was a one-time thing, but she later became dependent on the thrill. Since the interns didn't make enough money, they relied on Kat to cover their expenses. She eventually realized they were taking advantage of her financially, but by then, she was already immersed in that lifestyle. When Lee questioned why she didn't confess earlier, Kat claimed she had spoken to me about opening up the marriage due to guilt. However, my refusal to agree prevented her from confessing anything to me. I find it confusing. What's the point of asking for an open marriage after cheating on me? Kat is resisting signing the divorce papers and blaming me for motivating her nightstands, but she can't provide evidence for her false claims. Now she's seeking alimony, citing mental distress caused by the divorce. If anyone deserves compensation, it's me, as I had to endure the terrible feelings of betrayal. Later that month, Kat's sister Amy, name changed, contacted me, pleading for reconciliation. She shared how Kat is going through tough times, leading to severe depression due to the interns damaging her reputation at the office. They circulated compromising pictures of Kat having fun with them to other senior employees, mocking her as an easy target. This gossip made her the center of attention at the office, forcing her to leave. Senior employees spread the gossip outside the office network. making it difficult for Kat to get referrals. I reminded Amy that Kat chose to leave our stable married life for a thrilling experience, and now she has to face the consequences. Anyways, I'm moving forward with my life. I've kept my drinking habits in check, focused on working out, eating healthy, and staying busy at work. The divorce proceedings are ongoing despite Kat's resistance. It got delayed, but my lawyer assures me that it will wrap up soon.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I'm a 40-year-old man, and my ex-wife, who is now 39, and I were high school sweethearts. We met at a video store in a small suburb right after I graduated, and we became close friends for about 6 months before I finally mustered the courage to kiss her. The rest, as they say, is history. Unfortunately, as you might guess, things didn't end well. I had never been around friends who cheated, so I had no idea about the trauma that would follow. It was a random turn of events that led me to discover the truth. My parents were visiting, and my ex had left to attend a coworker's wedding in another state, an event she had mentioned 2 weeks earlier. While I was watching a movie with my parents, I realized I had misplaced my phone. I grabbed my iPad and decided to use the Find My iPhone feature. Since we had been married for 10 years, we had many accounts tied together, including iTunes. When I checked the list, instead of seeing my phone first, I saw hers. Rather than being out of state as she claimed, she was at a local hotel about an hour away, which is also a popular brewery that hosts weddings. I figured that's where I'd find her with her coworkers. By around 8 p.m., I arrived at the hotel, but I couldn't locate her anywhere. After searching for 2 hours, I narrowed the GPS down to a specific wing of the hotel. She wasn't in the restaurant, so I decided to pull off what I call my Eddie Murphy impression. It's when you charm your way into a place you shouldn't be or score free stuff. Eddie was a pro at that in all his early movies. I approached the front desk and said, "My sister was at that wedding earlier, and I'm worried that some guy might have taken advantage of her because she's drunk. Can you give me the room number?" After a brief hesitation and a request for a phone number, they directed me to her room. My heart raced as I turned the corner, knowing what I was about to face. I knocked on the door and tried to channel Eddie again, calling out in the most pleasant tone I could manage while hiding my anger. "Room service?" A man answered, claiming I had the wrong room. In that moment, my cover was blown. "I think I have the right freaking room. How about you open up so we can have a conversation?" Suddenly, my cheating spouse started texting me, saying she had finally been found out and wanted to talk in the morning. She refused to come out of the room. "Oh, okay. Stay the night with your lover." Got it, I thought. I lingered for about an hour, hoping they would come out. The restrooms were in the hallways, European style, but neither of them emerged. Eventually, I gave up, took photos of her car for some kind of proof, and went home, heartbroken and unable to sleep that night. She asked me to meet her in a public park, knowing there would be people around. She actually said that. I couldn't help but think, oh, okay. I've never laid a finger on you or raised my voice in 20 years, but now domestic violence is a concern? I made her wait a few minutes and arrived at the park, feeling a mix of hope and dread. Despite the cold shoulder I got the night before, I was ready to make this work. I came with an open heart, expecting remorse. Surely, my wife of 10 to 11 years wouldn't gaslight our entire existence. When I saw her, she was in tears, saying she was sorry. But as I looked closer, it seemed like she was really just sorry she had been caught. I told her how I found out, and to my shock, she smirked at it. As we discussed her coming home, I was both appalled and mesmerized when she said, "I just can't go back to the way things were. I feel so trapped." It hit me. So she was playing the victim now, right? She spent 3 days in a hotel downtown, presumably with her lover, trying to figure out if she should come back home. The other person was in a relationship too and had a 12-year-old son, which may have added to the baggage she was dealing with. When she finally returned, she was completely listless, hardly speaking to me for a week and insisting that we sleep in separate bedrooms. She claimed she needed space to work through everything, stating she was done with the affair. We decided to do the right thing and start marital counseling. During the first session, no additional details emerged. I asked for transparency and shared how I had been going nuts researching affairs online. She continued to insist she couldn't go back to the way things were but couldn't articulate why our life hadn't felt happy or fulfilling enough. Fortunately, the therapist caught something significant and pointedly asked, "You've ended the affair, right?" There was shock and awe when it turned out she hadn't. I had been planning to call him to let him know, but I hadn't gotten around to it yet. As I began to delve deeper into the trickle truth, she confessed that she had been with him for at least a year prior, which was completely unknown to me. I had still felt happy in our intimate life, and it became clear that she had manipulated me with gifts and false pretenses. At one point, She gave me a watch with the inscription, "Loving you more every second," engraved on the underside. She would remember to text me and call when she was out of town on business, all while carrying on her affair. Eventually, I became a ball of tears, weighing my options. Either risk going to jail for losing my temper, escape this situation, or stick it out in the marriage I was so committed to. I loved this woman with every ounce of my being. During the second counseling session, transparency was non-existent. In fact, my wife had turned off location sharing on all her devices and changed all her passwords. Oh, how dare I ask for such things when she was so damaged? In the midst of her turmoil, she suggested an open relationship, believing that might fix everything. I was appalled and desperate, caught in a terrible mental state, and shamefully, I agreed. Deep down, I think I knew it was over, but I couldn't bring myself to accept it physically. The therapist cornered her, insisting that she needed to break things off with the other person, but there was still no word on that. She was told that polyamory might not be healthy for us at this point in our relationship. My ex vowed never to return to therapy again, claiming that the therapist had been mean to her. Oh, okay. I'm starting to see a pattern here. I cry every night, deep, terrible sobs, mourning the woman who once loved me and shared such intimacy. Suddenly, she wants nothing to do with me. We pass each other in the house like ghosts of our former selves. Sometimes, I find myself yelling and screaming at the world randomly. This is the darkest period I can recall in my life. We have moments that I think are makeup sessions, but afterward, she tells me she just needed to get off and that we never really loved each other. Ouch. I thought we had a great relationship that never lost its spark, and we were intimate in the bedroom 2 to 4 times a week. In a moment of weakness, I make a move that I now see as a mistake. I download Tinder and go on a couple of dates. I'm upfront with the people I meet, telling them I'm married and probably getting a divorce. I wanted to be transparent. One woman told me to give her a call if I finalized the divorce because I seemed like a great guy. The other took me home to her bed, and I wished I had waited. I realize now that my actions gave my ex ammunition and some mild justification for her affair. We'll get to that in a brief moment. I'm almost done with this crazy train. That same weekend, she goes on an overt camping trip with her affair partner, telling me about it in the name of transparency while refusing to validate anything else I'm asking. This setup only deepens my feelings of worthlessness and contributes to my decision to sleep with a Tinder fling. By Monday, I've had enough. Astonishingly, I'm still willing to work through this and repair the marriage that feels non-existent. While she's on a business trip, I find myself in a state of complete uncertainty. There's absolutely zero trust left. I call her and demand that she leave this man and commit to loving me, insisting that she rebuild the trust immediately or I'm leaving before she gets home. She responds that she just isn't sure she can do any of those things. It's no longer a marriage but a disaster that needs a cleanup crew. While she's away, I pack all my necessary belongings, grab the dog, and move in with some friends. She really didn't think I'd follow through. That night, she calls me sobbing, asking why I moved my stuff out. It's been a total trip to crazy town. I tell her she better act soon. After nearly 2 months of dealing with this, she needs to make a decision. I can no longer live in this situation, and I warn her that time is running out. More than likely, I won't be around in 2 months or less. I'd probably be firmly planted in the divorce camp by now, given that she had done nothing to work toward my decision and only made abusive comments with her selfishness and endless need for validation from other men. When I confronted her about the affair, she told me it was my fault for finding out. In her words, she wasn't looking for a way out. She would have happily played the good housewife role for the rest of our lives if I had just kept my mouth shut. I was sickened and almost driven mad by what I heard on that call. Who was this person I thought I knew? The one I had shared my life with? How could she value me so little, treating me like a disposable object, only there to fulfill her wants and desires? She backpedaled and claimed that this could be a good thing, that we could grow into something new and go on dates together, excited to see each other again. If it was meant to be, she said, we'd get back together. Seriously, what the hell? Even in this state, I knew that relationships require effort and that love is a practice, and I was getting none of that from this horrific shell of a human being. About a week later, I tried to meet up with her. She said she wanted to discuss the divorce, but it quickly turned into her wanting to flirt with me while simultaneously controlling my advances. She'd say how much she cared about me, but if I tried to touch her leg, she would insist that she wasn't ready for that yet. Since I had moved out, she had, quite insanely, also moved out and was now paying double rent for a nice city apartment, just a couple of blocks from the bar where we happened to be when I offered to walk her home. She scoffed at my offer and said she'd be fine, also insisting that she wasn't ready for me to see her new place. Oh, okay. I'd been your husband for nearly 11 years, and we'd been together for 20, and now I couldn't touch your leg or walk you home with the dog while I was staying in my new rented room at my friend's place. That night, I bit the pillow hard and sobbed harder than ever before. This wasn't just a fleeting moment of pain. I knew, deep down, that it was truly over. The woman I loved was gone. Maybe the rose-colored glasses had finally lifted, but I understood it would be in my best interest to never interact with this person again and to cut her out of my life completely. I knew I made a mistake, and a lot of people will call me a weak chicken, more likely a simp. As my therapist and many others have told me, I was the lobster in a pot, oblivious to the red flags around me. I didn't see the warning signs when she belittled my friends or claimed her friends hated me. I ignored the alarms when she bought me clothes and paraded me around like a trophy. Oh, okay, maybe I'm kind of fit and handsome, but it felt more like a performance than love. I didn't notice the red flags when she started traveling endlessly for work, nor did I recognize the signs when I asked her how she truly felt or if there was anything I could do to make our relationship better. Part of it was the eyes of love blinding me, and part of it was her unpleasant manipulation that I couldn't see until now. Nothing was ever enough for her. Not my job, not the house we owned, not even the work I did on it. It was all a ruse that fit perfectly with my codependency. I wanted to fix things and be good enough for her, and she was skilled at creating disasters and dangling carrots just enough to keep me engaged. I wasn't looking for love to be reciprocated. I wanted to love her so fiercely that it would be enough for both of us. With my head finally clear, I resolved that divorce was inevitable. Given her erratic attitude, I knew I'd have to be the one to file all the paperwork. I wish I could end this mega rant here, but you've only seen the awakening so far. The claws are about to come out. We hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, and I felt like I was making the right decisions for my life. Surrounded by friends, I was moving forward and gaining clarity, finally realizing the trap I had been in. I had made a firm decision to not get back together with her. Then, just when I thought I was clear of the chaos, my wayward spouse reached out. We were supposed to meet for coffee to discuss the divorce and entangling paperwork, but she texted me saying she couldn't make it at the designated time. Instead, she told me to text her 2 hours later to meet up. Fine. I followed suit, jumping through more hoops. When I did reach out, she told me she was at the nearby family mountain cabin and invited me to come up for the week and stay with her. Oh, okay. So I should just cast aside all my integrity and the small amount of self-respect I had just discovered to jump back into the sack? Hell no. I declined the invitation, emphasizing the importance of working through the divorce process. She got flustered and somehow a bit angry that I wasn't willing to drop everything in my life and run up to the cabin. When I asked her about the affair partner, her response was that he broke up with her as soon as I was out of the picture. Karma is a fickle creature sometimes. We finally meet for coffee, and I bring all the documents. She starts gushing about how good I look and how well I seem to be doing. Nope. I'm freaking devastated. And this isn't a game to me, lady. What's up with that? We covered the details about splitting up the house, and she insists she's entitled to more than half. I'm not allowed to touch her $41,000, but as a compromise, I get to keep my business untouched, the one I've worked my tail off on for the last 10 years. I mentioned that I'll stay on her healthcare for the duration of the divorce, and we'll tidy this situation up as fast as possible. As I turn to leave, she pursues me to my car, murmuring about something. I spin on my heel and ask if she has anything to say for herself. Frantically, I'm searching for some remorse, perhaps a splinter of the person I thought loved me. What I get is a phrase more akin to a question than an answer. I'm sorry for what? I retort, for what I did. Her words trail off as if released by the smallest church mouse in Zootopia. It's a benign effort, devoid of genuine remorse, more like shell shock from being caught. In that moment, it's revealing. It lets me know that my assumptions were correct. She wasn't sad because of anything she did. She was just upset about losing me as an asset. With her cover blown and now one of those men back in her life, the one who would do absolutely anything for her. It was the only apology I would ever receive. She asks me what our narrative is going to be, and I pause, trying to discern her question. Yeah, like, what are we going to tell people? Are we going to say we just mutually decided to see other people or something? What's our story? Oh, okay. Holy crap. Yeah, our story. Well, you can say whatever you want, but I'm absolutely going to tell the truth to anyone who will listen. That's what happened. You broke my heart, you stepped out on our marriage, and now you want your cake too. I've had enough, and I don't need to create a story to feel better about myself. I turn and walk away, and as soon as I cross the street, a train comes, ending our conversation. I immediately get in my car and text all her family about the end of the marriage and why it happened. No, for real, we're talking Wolverine claws. I felt good about shutting the door, knowing there was no healthy way to patch things up and realizing it wasn't a healthy relationship in the first place. As the divorce process took shape, other tragedies began to fall my way. I was hit with a full double-barrel shotgun right before D-Day, about 3 months earlier, when my bitch of a wife was out on one of her trips for work or sensual affairs. Our house flooded on Super Bowl Sunday. I went to a friend's house and came home to find a half a foot of water in our garage. Supposedly, she was in Amsterdam where some field offices were, but when I called to tell her about the disaster, it sounded like she was right next door. Either way, she just starts yelling at me to fix it. Of course that's what I'm doing. Had I been smart, I would have run to Home Depot the last few minutes they were open and grabbed a sump pump to drain the driveway. Luckily, our garage was attached to a finished basement and was the lowest point on the property. However, water had totally invaded the garage and almost breached the step up to gain entry into the house. I call a friend who's a landscape architect and handy in kinds of ways. We fill sandbags until midnight, but record rain is thwarting us as we go. We've saved the property for a few minutes, but with record rainfall that year, it's about to crest through. We come up with an idea to siphon the water from the driveway into my basement utility room where the drain is. We grab 60 feet of garden hoses, and I start pulling with my lungs to draw the water over. It works. Besides getting a mouthful of groundwater, I get a nice steady stream flowing to the drain at gallons per minute. The driveway doesn't recede, but it doesn't overflow anymore. This gives me some time to bail calf-deep water around the house using a shop vac. I pull up about 5 gallons at a time and heave it over. We have one gutter leaking, and instead of going to the French drain, it's pouring into the driveway. I start filling a huge garbage can that has to be emptied every 3 hours, or it fills with rainwater. I'm soaked, I'm in the rain, and I've had no sleep for 24 hours. When I do sleep, I set an alarm to get up and bail to make sure no damage happens. The next morning, I fly to Home Depot and grab an electric pump. It literally saves the day. This tiny $50 or less pump diverts over 3,000 gallons of water in an hour. In about 3 hours, it's completely moved the water from the driveway down the street to run off. Yep, I had nearly 9,000 gallons sitting on my driveway, and knee-deep. The same day I go into work and see my landlord for the business. He runs a construction company, and I lament my tale. He immediately calls his disaster team and sends over industrial dehumidifiers to soak up any water from the drywall in the structure. I leave these running for a couple of days, and the pump is still going in the driveway. When my soon-to-be ex-wife comes home, she starts to tell me that I was stressing her out with this situation and that I should have waited to tell her when she got back. Oh, okay. Thought you'd want to know about possibly losing the house and almost causing $40,000 in potential damages. Then she proceeds to state that the pump in the driveway is so embarrassing and that if I don't move it, she will. Mind you, it's still raining. I'm still trying to flood the house, and my neighbors have even come over to offer help. I come home from a morning appointment and find the pump moved to the garage. What the F? Eventually, I get the gutters repaired, and it stops raining enough to let the water recede. About a week later, on the nose, I come down with an awful flu I can't shake. On any regular spring Saturday, I start taking in movies and resting. Mid-afternoon, my chest starts to really hurt and won't subside despite over-the-counter medication. I mention to my bitch of a wife, what's going on, and I think it's getting serious. Can't you take care of yourself? She replies. Well, I'm not driving you to the urgent care. She continues. I'll go with you, but I'm not driving. Fine. I'll drive myself to the hospital. Thanks for coming with me. That's so gracious of you, sweetie. I get to the ER at the hospital and get all checked in. When I arrive, they notice my oxygen has dipped a little bit, but nothing alarming. We wait for over 3 hours, and my chest is pounding. It's getting hard to breathe. My ex refuses to ask anyone to see me, so I stumble to the front desk and almost fall over. They say they'll get to me and put me in a wheelchair. Finally, someone comes and takes more vitals but doesn't really get to the root of the problem. I say, I think I have pneumonia. My chest hurts and I can't breathe. They downplay it and say, probably not, but move me to a stretcher in an unoccupied room. I wait for about another hour, and at this point, I'm really confused and barely breathing. My ex is just staring at me with dagger eyes and is totally unhelpful. I literally start yelling, help, someone help me, over and over again. Much to this woman's chagrin, I don't care. I feel like I'm dying. I am dying. After about 3 to 5 minutes of this, someone comes in, upset that I'm yelling but then agrees to look me over. It turns out my oxygen has dropped to around 50%, which is life-threatening on its own, and my blood has nearly turned septic. I have bacterial pneumonia. I most likely developed it when I swallowed that bit of groundwater in my mouth while saving the house. She never thanked me for that. In fact, she actually said she deserved more than half of the house and should probably just take it all. After being put on all kinds of fluids, they gave me a morphine drip to help with the chest pains. With comfort, I go in and out of consciousness, and as I peer up from the stupor, I catch her gaze. This soulless human being looks back at me with eyes that wish I would have died right there. Life insurance would sure be a huge boon to this woman. We had million-dollar policies. It was then that I spotted it, the major red flag. I knew something was up, and even though I caught her accidentally, I started keeping records of things she'd say or people she claimed to be with. They didn't add up, and in my heart, I knew something was off. The icing on the cake was that the rounds of antibiotics I would take, combined with the stress of the divorce, wiped out my gut bacteria. I would spend the next year finding out that I have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. Now, back to the divorce in progress. I think that backstory is important because, along with the previous conversations, it lays the groundwork for the events that would happen next. After our meeting, where I was given the weakest attempt at an apology in the history of language, and I told her family about the affair, my ex set a few things in motion. First, she made a point to tell acquaintances and her immediate family that I was a deadbeat, a non-contributor to the relationship, emotionally and financially. She claimed she always wanted kids and that I didn't, painting me as the villain who was borderline abusive because of this. I still had to either explain the situation or cut people out of my life who wouldn't listen to my side of the story. The truth is the opposite, of course. She maintained for decades that she never wanted children, and any time I brought it up, it created a major fight. Her family took her side, and I lost relationships that I thought were my family over the last 20 years. I ended up going total no contact. Luckily, most of our friends who really knew us abandoned her and realized what she was doing. Once my ex heard about my gut bacteria and all my medical troubles, she called to say that we should be friends and that she would make sure I stayed on our insurance through her work. She asked to meet up again, but I declined, knowing she wanted to rekindle the feelings. As soon as I hung up, she began forging documents and turned in a letter of legal separation to HR to ban me from insurance. Rapidly, I found out at various doctor's appointments that something was wrong with my coverage. All they would tell me was that the policy was canceled. I did my best to get Cobra insurance, but they could never activate it, even though I was willing to fork over the $800 a month. It was a nightmare paying out of pocket and calling back and forth. I would call my ex, and she would lament that she had no idea what was going on, further complicating the situation. Eventually, I got the right person at HR, and they informed me they couldn't set up Cobra because they were looking for the judge who supposedly signed the legal separation documents my ex submitted. Appalled and further devastated, I asked them to define exactly what they meant. It turned out my ex had forged a court document, signed with a false name where the judge's credentials should have gone, and submitted it to HR to illegally remove me from the insurance before the divorce. I exclaimed that they'd never find the judge because what they were holding was fraudulent. We had never been in court together or filed any legal document of separation. HR went into a panic like I had never seen before and retroactively reinstated my insurance for all the time lost. That's also why I couldn't get the Cobra insurance. They were waiting for this imaginary judge to confirm the legality of it all. I texted my ex, furious that she'd better call HR to hasten the process. She played dumb, claiming, well, we are separated. I just don't want to do anything illegal, which was total BS. A week later, we met, and she handed me Cobra documents in my lawyer's office, trying to feign offering help after the fact. She sold the house, good for her, except she sold it out from under me. She signed my name on all the documents without my consent and never even informed me of the final amount. I had to find out through my lawyer and the discovery process about a lot of her actions, which stung deeply. She even tried to attack my business but backed off when I said I'd go after her. In hindsight, I wish I had pursued that $41,000 she had in her retirement fund because, in reality, it was essentially our retirement fund. We had conversations where I'd buy all the groceries while she claimed she was making contributions to our future. Being self-employed, my job didn't have that feature, so while I was saving for retirement, it didn't match the account she had the privilege of building. She was totally ready to devastate my business too, but fortunately for me, she was too cheap to hire a lawyer. Mine protected my assets and warned her that any judge would let me keep it and take her $41,000 if I wanted to. To this day, she continues to tell people I never wanted kids, and it breaks my mother's heart because she knows the truth. It was the other way around. Now, in a further attempt to prove her ridiculous narrative, She's pregnant with the AP's kid. That's right. They're still together, despite her telling me they had separated when we did. Turns out, she waited about 6 months and then introduced this guy to the family as her new boyfriend. He's an improv comic hobbyist but has a day job, and that's where they met, through her work. I found out all this because one of his friends decided to FB cyberstalk me and sent me a message expressing sympathy for everything that had happened, calling them both disgusting people. Fast forward to April, 2 years later. I start noticing these bizarre charges from the IRS totaling $112,000 going through my bank account. The numbers didn't add up, so I called both my bank and my accountant. You guessed it. My dearly departed ex had used my checking account to pay off her taxes. I gave her 24 hours to return the funds, threatening to claim fraudulent charges. In hindsight, I really wish I had gone through with that and let the IRS penalize her into oblivion. It would have been just desserts for everything she had put me through. For it, we texted back and forth. Of course, she wouldn't apologize and kept asking why I was so upset. It got really stupid, and I finally declared that I knew who the AP was, suggesting maybe his friend shouldn't contact me online. She didn't say anything about the situation. Her only response was to ask who I had been talking to. Despite everything, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Besides dealing with this person I once cared deeply about, I felt an urge to invoke wrath and scorn to the limits of human tolerance. But I'm here today to tell you, I made it. Not only did I survive all this because I'm a champ, but I'm better off for it. The most obvious thing is, you, the reader, are probably as sick and disgusted with this lady as I am. Human beings like this shouldn't be alive, and they certainly shouldn't bear children. This journey became so much more than just surviving. It vaulted me to a new level of growth that I'm ecstatic about. Shortly after beginning therapy, I discovered that I am a fixer. I grew up in a home where I was devalued, and my spouse fit right into that mold like a jigsaw piece. It felt like home. All her unquenchable demands and hoops to jump through had me constantly shifting myself, trying to be the person I thought would make her happy while never being true to myself. But now, I'm learning to prioritize my own happiness and well-being, and it feels incredible. Clearly, that strategy didn't work and set me up for failure. I was donating love without ever considering if I would receive it in return. One of the toughest lessons I had to walk through was separating my ex from my own self-worth. I had loved her for so long and so genuinely that I had tied a certain amount of my self-worth to our relationship. When that bond was severed, I unknowingly felt like my value had diminished, as if I needed to prove myself to her to be worth anything at all. What a tragic realization that was. I couldn't even put my finger on it until recently. Without knowing myself, I never learned to be comfortable in my own wants, goals, and desires. I buried all of that under the guise of trying to be good enough for others to like me. I was always outgoing and socially fun, but it didn't come from a healthy place. Now, I can see the red flags in people more clearly. I understand what I bring to the table and what I truly want in this world. In the past year, I have grown immensely in these areas. I've discovered who my true friends and family are, and I can't express how much I appreciate having them in my life. I'm no longer living for someone else's approval. Instead, I'm embracing my own value and finding joy in being true to myself. I met someone, a remarkable woman who has her priorities straight. We love each other in a fully reciprocated way. She shares in my accomplishments with pride and stands shoulder to shoulder with me through life's challenges. Her empathy and kindness create a strong foundation for our relationship, and under these values, I feel truly blessed to know her and to continue life's adventure with such a passionate partner. Recently, we bought a camper van, and for my 40th birthday, we're taking a cross-country road trip. It's everything I could have asked for and more, filled with nuances and experiences I wouldn't have known to seek in my previous relationship. I could easily write a long rant about all the simple and beautiful gestures she has shown me over the past year. My business has grown by leaps and bounds as well. I'm free to make decisions about it without the fear of shame or scorn from my partner. I take pride in what I've built, and I can work as hard as I want or take a break and let my staff handle the day-to-day operations if I choose. This is such a great place to be, far better than the years when I thought I was in a happy marriage. I've learned so much about myself and what I truly want, and now I'm living a life that reflects that understanding. For the first time in 30 years, I'm about to celebrate and truly enjoy my own birthday. It may seem like a small thing when I write it out, but it's a major milestone for me, accepting who I am and finding contentment in that. If you've read all of this, bless your heart for your curiosity and the support you're offering by allowing me to share this openly and freely. I'm not sure if this post will help anyone else, but it has certainly helped me in the cathartic process of shedding the betrayal caused by someone who truly hurt me. Moving forward, I feel lighter and more empowered, ready to embrace new experiences and celebrate life on my own terms. Here's to the journey ahead. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
When I look back on my relationship with Kathy, it's hard to believe how much things have changed. We've been together for 6 years, and most of the time, it's been great. I'm a marketing executive, so my job keeps me busy, but I've always made time for us. Kathy was driven and focused on her career too, and somehow, we found a balance. We had plans, we were happy, but over the past year, that balance started to fall apart. It all began when Kathy got involved with some feminist groups. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured it was just something she was passionate about, a hobby or a side project. It made her happy, and I wanted her to have things she cared about outside of work. But it quickly became clear that this was more than just a passing interest. She started talking about my body, my choice all the time, and I mean all the time. It felt like a switch flipped, and suddenly that slogan was the answer to everything. At first, I didn't mind. I thought it was just important to her. But soon, it felt like it was the only thing she wanted to talk about. No matter what we discussed, work, dinner plans, even a random show on TV, it always circled back to that phrase. The first time it really became an issue was at one of my work dinners. It was supposed to be a casual evening, nothing major, just a few of my colleagues and their partners getting together to talk about work, travel, everyday stuff. Things were going well, and everyone was enjoying themselves. But then, out of nowhere, Kathy shifted the conversation toward women's rights, specifically around bodily autonomy. She got really passionate, diving into how important it is for women to have complete control over their bodies. Now, I don't disagree with her, but this just wasn't the time or place for that kind of discussion. I could tell people were uncomfortable. There were these awkward glances exchanged around the table, and the whole mood just shifted. What was supposed to be a fun, light dinner turned tense. My boss's wife even tried to steer the conversation back to something else, but Kathy wasn't letting it go. She kept pushing the topic, and I could feel the tension building. I sat there trying to stay calm, but inside, I was cringing. This wasn't what I needed, especially not in front of my colleagues. After that night, I tried to convince myself it was just a one-time thing. Maybe she'd had a bad day, or gotten too caught up in the moment. But deep down, I knew something was changing. It wasn't just that one dinner. It was the beginning of something bigger. Kathy was becoming more and more consumed by her activism, and it wasn't just affecting our conversations at home. It was starting to bleed into every aspect of our lives, even my work. At first, I tried to brush it off. I kept telling myself, it's just a phase, she'll find her balance again. But as time went on, it became clear that this wasn't something she was going to let go of. It was becoming a big part of her identity. And as much as I wanted to support her, I started to worry. Not just about us, but about how this was affecting my career, too. When I finally suggested that she tone it down a bit, her reaction was intense, like I'd slapped her in the face. She made it clear she felt like I was dismissing something that mattered deeply to her. In her eyes, it was bigger than both of us, and my suggestion felt like a betrayal. I could tell she saw me as standing on the other side of a line she wasn't willing to cross. Things started to change after that. I began leaving her out of work events. At first, I told myself it was just easier that way. Less tension, fewer awkward situations. But I knew deep down, I was distancing myself from the chaos it could cause. She noticed. I could tell by the way she looked at me when she saw pictures of those dinners on social media, me laughing with colleagues while she was home. It stung for her, and honestly, it hurt me too. But I couldn't let it keep affecting my work life. Something had to give. Now from Kathy's side. My feminist friends were always pushing me to go further, and their support gave me a sense of purpose. They'd say things like, "You're doing the right thing, Kathy. You're standing up for women who can't speak for themselves." Hearing that fueled my determination. Slowly, I started to believe that maybe Ben was the one who didn't understand. I justified everything I was doing, telling myself that Ben and his colleagues were just too privileged to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about me, it was about all women. But deep down, I knew something was shifting between Ben and me. The tension at home was thick, and even when we were together, it felt heavy. I kept trying to bring up my activism, hoping he'd finally see where I was coming from, but each time, he'd give me that tired, frustrated look. It was like he was done with the conversation before it even started. I wanted him to care as much as I did, to join me in this fight, but he just seemed more distant with every passing day. One night, I came home after a rally, completely energized. I was excited to tell him about how great the turnout had been. I walked in, expecting Ben to ask how it went, but he barely glanced up from his laptop. "How was it?" he mumbled, sounding like he didn't even care. "It was amazing, Ben," I said, hoping to get more of a reaction. "We had a huge crowd, and people are really starting to listen." He just muttered, glad to hear it, without looking away from his screen. My heart sank. It wasn't just that he wasn't interested. It felt like he didn't care at all. It was becoming harder to ignore the widening gap between Ben and me. I often found myself wanting to yell, to force him to understand how much this cause meant to me, but I always held back. I didn't want to push him further away. Then, one day, I got an invitation to speak at a local event about women's rights. It was a big opportunity, and I was filled with excitement. I rushed home, hoping that maybe this would be the moment he'd finally get how important my activism had become. When I told him, his reaction was so cold it stung. "That's great, but you know I can't make it," he said flatly. "I've got a big meeting that night." It felt dismissive, like he wasn't even trying to engage. A wave of disappointment and anger hit me. "You can't just keep ignoring this part of my life, Ben. This is huge for me." My voice was sharp, but I couldn't help it. "I'm not ignoring it. I just have responsibilities too," he snapped back, clearly frustrated. It was as if we were speaking two different languages, each too caught up in our own worlds to bridge the gap. I knew then that the clash between us was inevitable. He wasn't going to understand. He was too wrapped up in his career, while I was determined to push forward with my cause. I told myself I was on the right side of history, even if that meant standing alone. But with each day that passed, the distance between us only grew wider. The loneliness began to creep in, slowly at first, like a shadow I couldn't shake. But I told myself it was worth it. I was fighting for something bigger, something that truly mattered, even if it meant sacrificing my relationship with Ben. I convinced myself that this cause was more important than the life we had built together. The more distant he became, the more I doubled down on my activism, as if that would somehow fill the growing void. It wasn't easy, but I kept telling myself that in the end, I'd be on the right side of this fight, no matter what it cost me. I wouldn't back down. Now from Ben's side. The business dinner was supposed to go smoothly, a key opportunity with one of our biggest clients, Frank. I was confident we could solidify the deal and make a strong impression. Everything seemed fine at first. We talked about the project, and for a brief moment, I felt optimistic. But then Kathy arrived, and the atmosphere shifted. The tension was subtle at first, but it quickly became undeniable. As we were discussing the deal, Kathy suddenly steered the conversation in a completely different direction. "Let's talk about women's rights," she said, her face lighting up like she'd just discovered something profound. My stomach sank. Without hesitation, she launched into her passionate speech about my body, my choice. Frank's expression shifted from polite curiosity to discomfort in seconds. He tried to steer things back to business, but Kathy wasn't going to let it go. She was on a roll, oblivious to the awkwardness filling the room. "Men need to understand what women go through," she said, her voice rising with conviction. I could feel my pulse quicken as I glanced around the table. The other guests were fidgeting, exchanging uneasy glances. It was clear that everyone was uncomfortable, and I could feel the opportunity slipping away with every word she spoke. I could practically feel the deal slipping through my fingers. After that dinner, everything went downhill fast. The next day, I noticed clients avoiding my calls, meetings being postponed, and a strange tension in the air at the office. Whispers echoed around the break room, and I overheard a couple of colleagues mentioning how my personal life was starting to impact my professional image. At first, I shrugged it off, dismissing it as idle gossip. But the real wake-up call came a few days later. My boss called me into his office, and as soon as he leaned back, struggling to find the right words, I knew something was off. "Ben, you're doing excellent work," he began, but I could feel the but looming in the air. "There have been some comments about your wife's behavior at events. It's becoming a concern for some clients." The message was clear. Kathy's actions weren't just personal anymore. They were becoming a professional liability, and my job was on the line. He looked at me with sympathy, but also with a firmness that said this was serious. "Just think about it," he added, as if the decision was entirely up to me. I left his office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. When I got home that night, I knew there was no avoiding it anymore. I had to confront Kathy. This wasn't just about her beliefs or actions. It was affecting our future. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm as I brought it up over dinner. "Kathy, we need to talk about what happened at the dinner last week," I said, already bracing myself for her reaction. As expected, she immediately got defensive. What? You didn't like what I said? You don't support women's rights now, she shot back. It's not that, I snapped, my patience wearing thin. It's about the timing. You can't just take over conversations at my work events. It's affecting my career. Her expression hardened. So, you want me to shut up? To be some trophy wife? I'm not going to be quiet just because you're afraid of what people think. That's not it at all. I shot back, frustration boiling over. I'm not asking you to silence yourself. I just need you to understand that there's a time and place for everything. Right now, my job is at stake, and your actions are jeopardizing it. She crossed her arms, glaring at me defiantly. I'm not going to stop speaking out. This is who I am now, Ben. If you can't handle it, maybe you should rethink your priorities. That hit me hard. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. It was a clash of values. We weren't just arguing about an event. It felt like we were standing on opposite sides of something much bigger. To her, this activism had become her identity, more important than our relationship or my career. I felt a mix of anger and desperation rising inside me. While I was fighting for our future, she was too wrapped up in her crusade to realize the damage she was causing. It felt like I was shouting into a void, trying to get through to her, but she wasn't hearing me. The more I pushed, the more distant she became, and it was clear we were heading for a collision. I just didn't know how much longer I could take it. Now from Kathy's side, I never thought I'd find something that would completely change how I see the world. But over the past year, everything shifted for me. When I started attending feminist meetings and discussions, something clicked. These weren't just casual talks. They were eye-opening, deep dives into issues that women face every day, issues I had somehow ignored or never given much thought to before. The more I learned, the more I realized that simply being aware wasn't enough. I needed to take action. The phrase my body, my choice resonated deeply with me. It's not just about reproductive rights. It's about control over our bodies, our choices, and our futures as women. The more I embraced this idea, the clearer it became how much still needs to be done. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. This wasn't just a slogan to me anymore. It became my personal mission, something I needed to carry into every part of my life. If I didn't stand up for what I believed in, who would? But not everyone understands, especially Ben. I know he loves me, and we've been together for 6 years, but lately, it feels like we're living in two different worlds. While I've been growing and learning, he seems stuck, unable, or unwilling to see things from my perspective. Every time I bring up topics like bodily autonomy or women's rights, I can see him tense up, like he's bracing for an argument. It's as if the more passionate I become, the more distant he feels. At first, I really tried to explain it to him, to make Ben understand why this is so important, but he just doesn't get it. And that's incredibly frustrating. I've seen how uncomfortable he gets whenever I bring it up in front of other people, especially his colleagues or friends. But why should I stay quiet? If these people, and even Ben, don't understand the significance of bodily autonomy, isn't it my responsibility to speak up? Isn't it my duty to educate them and help open their eyes? This isn't just about me. It's about women everywhere. If I don't speak up, who will? And honestly, Ben should be supporting me in this. We're supposed to be a team, right? I know what happened at that work dinner bothered him. I could feel it. The way he kept glancing at me, that nervous smile whenever I brought up women's rights. It was obvious he didn't want me talking about it. But why shouldn't I? It's not like I'm bringing up something irrelevant. These are real issues affecting real women, and I refuse to sit there and pretend everything is fine when it's not. Ben needs to understand that this is bigger than just his career or how his colleagues feel. This is about justice, about standing up for what's right, and I'm not going to compromise that, not even for him. The fact that he wants me to tone it down makes me furious. How could he expect me to stay quiet about something so important just to protect his image at work? It feels like he's trying to control me, to silence me, and that's exactly the kind of behavior I'm fighting against. I'm not going to be the quiet, supportive girlfriend who stays in the background anymore. I'm a voice for change, and if that makes people uncomfortable, then so be it. I won't apologize for being passionate about something that matters so much. Sure, Ben might not like that I've brought up these issues at his work events or in front of his colleagues, but that's on him. He should be proud that I'm standing up for what I believe in, not embarrassed. I thought he'd eventually come around and see the importance of this movement, support me fully, even. But the more I push, the more distant he seems to get. Maybe one day he'll understand. Maybe he won't. But one thing's for sure. I'm not backing down. Not for him, not for anyone. This fight is bigger than our relationship, and I'm not going to compromise my voice or my values. Now from Ben's side, I was done. I burst through the door, my frustration spilling over like a tidal wave. I didn't care that Kathy was lounging on the couch, casually scrolling through her phone. This wasn't going to be a calm conversation. It was an explosion waiting to happen. "What's going on?" she asked, pretending like she had no clue. But I wasn't in the mood for games. "I just found out I didn't get that promotion because of you." I shot back, my voice shaking with anger. "Mark told me straight up. Your rants at work events have cost me dearly. Your obsession with your activism has ruined everything." Her eyes narrowed, and she sat up, bracing for the fight. "Oh, come on. You're blaming me for your career? Really?" "Yes, I am," I snapped. "Every dinner, every meeting you've hijacked with your soapbox speeches has turned into a nightmare for me. You've made me look like a fool in front of clients and colleagues." I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I was done holding back. "You think it's okay to derail my work life because you're chasing some misguided crusade? You're selfish and entitled." Kathy's face twisted with anger. "You don't get it, do you? I'm fighting for important issues," she shot back, her voice rising to match mine. "For women's rights? Screw your important issues. You've turned everything into chaos. And for what? So you can feel good about yourself? This isn't activism. It's a wrecking ball. You've dragged our lives into this mess, and I'm done tolerating it," I shouted, my frustration boiling over. "I can't take it anymore. You want me to just sit down and be quiet?" she shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I want you to recognize the damage you're doing. Your need to make every social event about your ideology is ruining our marriage," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I can't keep pretending everything is okay while you act like this is some game." I paused, taking a breath before delivering the final blow. "I'm filing for divorce." The shock in her eyes was almost satisfying, but that wasn't why I said it. I was past that. "You've already wrecked everything, and you don't even see it. You think this is all about your cause when it's really about your selfishness." "Ben, you can't be serious," she exclaimed, her voice rising in disbelief. "Oh, I'm dead serious. You've put your ego above our relationship, and I refuse to be dragged down with you. I'm done being your scapegoat for your shenanigans." I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving her standing there in shock. The decision hung heavy in the air, but deep down, I knew it was the right one. For the first time in a long time, I was putting myself first, and as difficult as it was, it felt like a weight had been lifted. No more excuses, no more trying to manage her chaos. I was free. A few months have passed since the divorce, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all. My life feels like it's in ruins, and I can't help but wonder if this is all my fault. Just last week, I had a meeting with one of our biggest clients. I thought maybe I could make a point about women's rights during the presentation, show that I hadn't completely abandoned the ideals Kathy had been so passionate about. But it backfired spectacularly. Instead of engaging in a conversation, I ended up arguing with the client. By the end of it, he was furious, and I could see the damage I had caused. My boss called me into her office the next day. She didn't mince words. "We can't have employees who alienate our clients," she said, and just like that, I was let go. It felt like a slap in the face. My career, the one I had worked so hard to build, was gone in an instant. Now, I'm left trying to figure out where everything went so wrong, wondering if I've been fighting the wrong battles all along. Now from Kathy's side. As I sit alone in my apartment, the silence is deafening. I reflect on how much I've lost. Ben is gone, and I'm pretty sure he's moved on with his life. We shared so many dreams, so much laughter, and plans for the future. Now, all I have are memories of what we once had, memories that feel distant and hollow. I didn't just lose my husband. I lost my partner, the person who supported me through everything, even when I didn't realize it. And I took that for granted. Then there's my job. I was so consumed by my beliefs, so focused on proving my worth as an activist, that I didn't see the damage I was causing. I thought I was doing something important, something that mattered. But now, in hindsight, I realize I was being reckless. My body, my choice became my mantra, but I never considered how it was affecting the people around me, especially Ben. I was so wrapped up in my cause that I forgot about my responsibilities, about balance, about the life I had with him. And now, sitting here in the silence of my empty apartment, I feel the weight of my choices pressing down on me, suffocating in its intensity. I whisper to myself, barely audible over the sound of my own tears, was it worth it? I've been carrying a deep sense of regret, and it weighs on me more every day. My dedication to activism became an obsession, and in the process, I lost sight of everything else in my life. I truly believed I was fighting for something greater than myself, but in doing so, I alienated the very people who cared for me. I was so focused on my cause that I failed to see how my actions were pushing everyone away. Now, I find myself isolated. Friends I used to be close with have slowly drifted away, and I can't blame them. They watched me spiral into extremes, becoming someone they hardly recognized. I always thought these people would have my back, but now I realize I've driven them away. I feel trapped in this bubble I've created. It's suffocating, and I'm the one who built it. There was a time when I had a strong support system, a circle of people I could rely on. But now, it feels like I'm completely alone. I keep replaying moments in my mind, times when I could have taken a step back, when I could have found a healthier balance between my beliefs and the relationships that mattered. But I didn't. I chose confrontation, to make my voice heard no matter the consequences. And now, I'm left questioning, what was all that noise for, and was it really worth the cost? My career, my marriage, everything I once cherished, has fallen apart. What remains are the convictions I once clung to so fiercely, but now they feel more like chains than any source of strength or empowerment. There's this overwhelming emptiness that surrounds me, and I can't shake it. I used to believe that standing firm in my beliefs would guide me toward a better future, that it would give me purpose and direction. But here I am, left with nothing but shattered pieces of the life I used to know. I'm standing at a crossroads, unsure of how to begin picking up the fragments of what's left. It's not just about figuring out where to start. I don't even know if it's possible to rebuild at this point. There's a part of me that knows change is necessary, that I can't keep going down this path. But I'm afraid that maybe it's too late, that the damage is irreversible. All I have now is time to reflect on the wreckage. I keep asking myself if there's a way forward, or if I'm destined to live in the aftermath of my own choices, wondering if I'll ever manage to rebuild what was lost. Ben and Kathy divorced on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. Their relationship, once filled with love and shared dreams, crumbled as they drifted apart. For Kathy, it wasn't just the end of a marriage, but the culmination of choices driven by her deep commitment to activism. A passionate feminist, she had poured herself into her work, often prioritizing her cause over her personal life. In the aftermath of the divorce, Kathy began to question those decisions. What once felt like empowerment now felt like a hollow victory. Her circle of friends, now mostly divorced women who had made similar choices, became her primary source of companionship. But even in their company, Kathy couldn't escape the nagging sense of regret. She had sacrificed her marriage and the life she'd built with Ben, all in pursuit of ideals she now struggled to connect with. Looking back, Kathy realized that in fighting for a cause, she had let go of something equally important, and the loss left her feeling more isolated than ever. Ben, on the other hand, married Nancy, who was a devoted wife and a strong support for Ben. They now have a kid, and Ben got his promotion that he deserved. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.